A man tends to his garden, a small sanctuary he has cultivated for decades. Each morning, he greets the first rays of sunlight with his hands in the soil, nurturing the life that erupts from it. His actions are simple, born of care and dedication. He harms no one, and seeks only to create a space of quiet beauty. He is, by any measure we might use, a good person. Then one night, a storm arrives without warning, a furious, indiscriminate expression of nature's power. It rips through his garden, shattering branches, uprooting ancient plants, and leaving behind a landscape of ruin. The next morning, the man stands amidst the devastation. He did nothing wrong. He was diligent, he was kind, he was patient, and yet he must bear the consequence. His quiet corner of the world is a portrait of loss, and a question hangs heavy in the silence. A question that echoes from this small, broken garden into the very heart of our human experience. Why? Why do terrible things happen to good people? This is not merely a question, it is a pain we all recognize. We see it in the compassionate friend who receives a dire diagnosis. We see it in the honest, hard-working family that loses everything in a sudden disaster. We see it in the eyes of innocent people caught in the crossfire of a world they did not create. We are surrounded by what feels like a profound and senseless injustice. This feeling, this dissonance between what we think should be and what is, becomes a deep well of anxiety, of anger, of a creeping despair that can poison the very root of our lives. It makes us question the nature of the universe itself. Is it all just chaos, a random series of events with no meaning? Or are we living under the watch of some indifferent or even cruel cosmic force? We seek an answer, a reason that can soothe the ache of this perceived unfairness. This journey we are about to embark upon does not offer a simple answer. It does not promise to justify the ways of the world in a neat and tidy package. Instead, it invites us to look through a different lens, a lens polished by 2,500 years of contemplative wisdom from the Buddhist tradition. This perspective suggests that what happens to us is not the work of chance, nor is it the judgment of an external power. It is the result of a law, as natural and as impersonal as gravity, a law of cause and effect known as karma. This path does not seek to explain away suffering, but to understand its nature so deeply that we can find a profound and unshakable peace, not by avoiding the storms of life, but by discovering a stillness within them. This is not a search for worldly fairness, but a journey towards inner freedom. The question itself has a weight. It is not a fleeting curiosity that one might entertain on a quiet afternoon. It is an echo, a deep and resonant vibration that sounds in the hollow spaces of our hearts when we witness the collision of innocence and suffering. It is a question that feels ancient, whispered in every language, across every culture, whenever the good are met with misfortune. To ask it is to participate in a sacred human ritual of grappling with the profound mystery of our existence. This is not an intellectual problem to be solved like an equation. It is a spiritual ache. It is the soul's natural response to a world that so often refuses to align with our deepest sense of right and wrong. When we see a person who has dedicated their life to kindness, to generosity, to the quiet work of mending the torn fabric of the world, and we then see that same person struck down by illness, or betrayal, or loss, something inside of us protests. It is a cry against the apparent chaos of it all. This cry is born of empathy. It arises because we are not isolated islands. We are connected by invisible threads of shared experience, and when we see injustice done to another, we feel the tremor in our own being. We instinctively place ourselves in their position, and from that vantage point, the world can seem terrifyingly arbitrary. Our yearning for an answer is rooted in a profound, almost childlike desire for the universe to be a place of simple, transparent fairness. We are raised on stories where the hero is rewarded and the villain is punished, where virtue is crowned and vice is vanquished. We construct a mental model of reality that operates like a celestial ledger, where good deeds are deposits and bad deeds are withdrawals, and we expect the balance to be settled promptly. We want the world to make sense in a way that is immediate, observable, and gratifying. When a person plants a seed of kindness, we want to see the flower of happiness bloom for them tomorrow, not in some distant, unseen future. When a person sows discord, we want to see them trip on their own tangled weeds right before our eyes. This desire for instant cosmic accounting is perfectly understandable. It is a desire for order, for safety, for a world where the rules are clear and consistently enforced. But it is this very expectation that becomes a primary source of our own suffering. The universe, in its vast and patient unfolding, does not operate on a human timetable. Its justice is not the swift crack of a gavel in a courtroom, but the slow, inexorable growth of a forest, a process so immense and spanning such lengths of time that we, standing on the forest floor, can only ever see a tiny fraction of the whole. To demand that the cosmos conform to our simplistic, immediate model of fairness is like demanding that a great oak tree grow to its full height in a single day. When it fails to do so, we become disillusioned, we feel betrayed, we declare the entire process of nature to be flawed and unjust. Imagine a king, a ruler of impeccable virtue, who was tormented by this very question. He saw dishonest merchants thrive, while honest farmers struggled. He saw cruel courtiers gain favor, while kind servants were overlooked. Determined to establish a reign of perfect and immediate justice, he decreed a new law. He created a magical system in his court. Anyone who performed a demonstrably good act, like giving food to a beggar, would instantly find a gold coin in their pocket. Anyone who committed a malicious act, like spreading a lie, would instantly feel a harmless but unpleasant sour taste in their mouth. For a time, the kingdom became a model of order. People lined up to perform good deeds, eager for the immediate reward. Malicious gossip all but disappeared. The king was pleased. He believed he had finally bent reality to the shape of justice. But soon, complexities emerged that his simple system could not handle. A man was caught stealing a loaf of bread, and the sour taste filled his mouth. But the king learned the man's children were starving. Was his action purely evil? A soldier, following the king's own orders in a border skirmish, injured an enemy combatant, and the sour taste appeared. But was he not acting out of loyalty and duty? A wealthy nobleman gave 1,000 gold coins to an orphanage, and 1,000 new coins instantly filled his purse. But his motive was not compassion. It was the arrogant desire to be seen as the most generous man in the land. Was his action purely good? The king grew deeply troubled. His perfect system of justice was creating more confusion than clarity. His wisest advisor, a quiet woman who had spent her life observing the patterns of nature, came to him. She did not speak of laws or decrees. She asked him to look out the window at the royal garden. "Your Majesty," she said, "you see the beautiful rose that bloomed this morning, a reward for the gardener's care last week, but you do not see the great cedar tree in the corner. The seed for that tree was planted by your great-grandfather. It lay dormant for years. It weathered droughts and storms that no one now remembers. Its slow, silent growth is a result of causes stretching back a century. Likewise, there are weeds that sprout today from seeds scattered by a careless visitor many seasons ago. The garden's reality is a tapestry of causes near and far, seen and unseen. You cannot understand the state of the garden today by only looking at what the gardener did yesterday." The king finally understood. True cause and effect was a force far more profound and patient than his simple system of rewards and punishments. He had been trying to judge a forest by looking at a single leaf. When we are confronted with this complexity, when our simple model of fairness shatters against the hard wall of reality, the mind tends to leap to one of two dangerous conclusions. The first is the cold comfort of nihilism. We declare that there is no meaning, no pattern, no justice at all. The universe is a blind, mechanical process, a chaotic storm where good and bad things happen for no reason whatsoever. The kind person's illness is just a random mutation. The cruel person's success is just a lucky roll of the dice. There is a strange, empty freedom in this view, but it is the freedom of a ghost in a machine. It drains the world of purpose. It severs the bonds of moral responsibility, and it leaves us shivering in a cosmos that is ultimately cold and indifferent to our fate. The second conclusion is a more subtle, but perhaps more poisonous one, the conclusion of judgment. To preserve our belief in a just world, we begin to subconsciously search for the hidden flaw in the good person who suffers. We think, well, they must have done something. Maybe they weren't as good as they seemed. There must be a reason, and the reason must be their fault. This is a defense mechanism. It protects us from the terrifying thought that suffering can be arbitrary, but in doing so, it corrodes our compassion. It leads to victim blaming. to a hardness of the heart, to a subtle sense of superiority. It is a way of distancing ourselves from another's pain by judging them worthy of it. The path of Buddhist inquiry offers a third way, a path that steers between the abyss of meaninglessness and the brittle fortress of judgment. It asks us to do something radical, to simply hold the question, to stay with the discomfort of not knowing, to resist the urge to jump to a simple conclusion. It invites us to become patient investigators, like the king's wise advisor, and to begin looking at the world, not with the expectation of how it should be, but with a quiet, open curiosity about how it is. It suggests there is a law, a natural principle at play, but it is more subtle, more intricate, and operates on a grander scale than we can easily perceive. To begin to understand this principle, we must first clear away the clutter of our preconceptions. We must take the word that is so often used to describe this law, the word karma, and wipe it clean of the many layers of misunderstanding that have been smeared upon it. Before we can explore what karma is, we must first be crystal clear about what it is not. Before we can approach the heart of this ancient wisdom, we must first enter a space of stillness and unlearning. We must take the word karma, a word that has traveled so far from its home in the East, and gently dust it off. It has been handled by so many, passed through so many languages and cultures, that it has picked up fingerprints of meaning that do not belong to it. In the marketplace of modern spirituality, it has been transformed into a brand, a hashtag, a simple slogan. It is often presented as a mystical, exotic force, something akin to cosmic revenge, or a magical system of wish fulfillment. To truly understand its power and its subtlety, we must first have the courage to release these popular caricatures. We must be willing to admit that what we think we know about karma might be the very thing preventing us from understanding it. So let us begin not by adding a new definition, but by sweeping the ground clean, by clearly and compassionately stating what karma is not. First, and perhaps most importantly, karma is not fate. It is not a pre-written script of your life, handed down by an unseen playwright, which you are forced to act out upon a stage. It is not a deterministic destiny, a set of concrete events that are bound to happen to you no matter what you do. This idea of fatalism is deeply contrary to the entire spirit of the Buddhist path. The teachings of the Buddha are, at their core, a message of empowerment. They are a declaration that change is possible, that freedom is attainable, that you are the ultimate architect of your own inner world. If everything were already decided, if your future were a fixed point on a map, then any effort to be kinder, more mindful, or wiser would be utterly pointless. The practice of meditation would be a waste of time. The cultivation of compassion would be a futile exercise. The path to liberation would be a cruel joke. The reality of karma is the precise opposite of this. It is not a declaration that your life is sealed, but a profound statement that your life is conditional, shaped by your actions. Think of it not as a stone tablet upon which your destiny is carved, but as the soil in a garden. Past actions may have determined the quality of your soil today. It might be fertile and rich, or it might be rocky and dry. This is the inheritance of your past. But at this very moment, and in every moment that follows, you are the gardener. You hold the tools. You have the power to pull the weeds of hatred and confusion. You have the ability to add the nutrients of generosity and wisdom. You, and you alone, decide which seeds you will plant right now. The future is not a destination you arrive at. It is a garden you are actively cultivating with every thought, every word, and every deed. Second, karma is not a system of reward and punishment administered by an external, judging entity. This is a common distortion that arises when we try to fit an Eastern concept into a Western religious framework. We imagine a cosmic judge, a celestial king on a throne, watching our every move, tallying our good and bad deeds in a great book, and dispensing rewards and punishments accordingly. We imagine a being that we must please, appease, or bargain with. This entire image must be compassionately set aside. The law of karma is as impersonal as the law of gravity. Gravity does not judge you. If you step off a cliff, you will fall. You are not being punished for your foolishness. You are simply experiencing the natural, unavoidable consequence of your action within a system of laws. There is no anger in gravity, no retribution. It just is. In the same way, if you thrust your hand into a fire, you will be burned. The fire is not punishing you for your lack of caution. The fire holds no personal opinion of you whatsoever. The pain you feel is the fire's nature interacting with your nature. It is a direct, impersonal result of a cause. Karma operates in this same way. It is a natural law of the cosmos. Actions create results. Causes produce effects. There is no one to blame, and no one to beg for mercy. This understanding is profoundly liberating. It means we can stop looking outside of ourselves for the source of our happiness and suffering, and begin to take full ownership of our lives. Third, karma is not a simple transactional exchange. It is not a cosmic vending machine where you insert a good deed and a blessing pops out. It is not a spiritual bank account where you make deposits of virtue, hoping to make a withdrawal of good fortune later on. This view reduces a profound natural law to a childish form of bartering. It encourages a kind of spiritual materialism where we perform good actions, not out of a genuine sense of compassion, but with a selfish motive, with the secret hope of getting something in return. An act of charity performed for the sake of reputation, an act of kindness done with the expectation of being thanked or repaid, is a seed planted from a tainted source. The Buddha was very clear about this. The most important factor in any action is the intention behind it. The why is more important than the what. A small, anonymous gift given from a heart of pure, selfless compassion will create a far more positive and powerful karmic result than a grand, public donation made out of pride or a desire for recognition. The law of karma is far more complex and organic than a simple ledger. It is less like accounting and more like ecology. An action is not a single, isolated event. It is a seed that, when planted in the soil of the mind, grows into a plant. That plant will not only bear its own fruit, but it will also drop new seeds. It will change the chemistry of the soil around it. It will attract certain insects and repel others, and it will contribute to the entire, intricate ecosystem of your inner and outer world in ways you may never fully trace. Finally, and this is crucial for our central question, karma is not an excuse for judgment or a justification for passivity. When we see someone suffering and we think, that is their karma, we are engaging in an act of profound arrogance. We are claiming to understand the infinitely complex web of causes and conditions that have led to that person's present moment, a web that stretches back through this life and countless others. This is a knowledge that no human being possesses. To use karma as a label for another's misfortune is a way to create distance, to make ourselves feel safe, to insulate ourselves from the raw reality of their pain. It is a cold and heartless intellectualization of suffering. The truly compassionate response, the response born from a genuine understanding of our shared existence, is not to diagnose their karma, but to feel their pain and to ask, how can I help? Equally misguided is the use of karma as a reason for passive resignation. To sigh and say, this suffering is just my karma, there is nothing I can do, is to fundamentally misunderstand the teaching. This is not acceptance, it is defeat. A true understanding of karma is the ultimate antidote to helplessness. It is a radical call to action. It is the realization that if my past thoughts and actions have created the conditions of my present, then my present thoughts and actions have the power to create the reality of my future. It means that at this very moment, you are planting the seeds for what is to come. This is not a burden. It is the greatest of gifts. It is the key to true freedom. It shifts you from the role of a passive victim of your past to the active, conscious creator of your future. So we stand on this newly cleared ground. We have released the heavy baggage of these misconceptions. Karma is not fate. It is not a cosmic judge. It is not a simple transaction. And it is certainly not an excuse for cruelty or inaction. By emptying the word of these false meanings, we have created a space. We have made room for a more authentic and profound understanding to arise. We have polished the lens, and now we can begin to look through it. If karma is none of these things, then what, in its essence, is it? The answer begins with a simple, yet world-altering principle: the natural law of cause and effect. Having swept the ground clean of misunderstanding, we can now begin to build. We can approach the concept of karma not as a foreign superstition, but as a profound and elegant principle that lies at the very heart of the Buddhist understanding of reality. If karma is not fate, not judgment, not a simple transaction, then what is it? The answer, in its essence, is breathtakingly simple. Karma is the law of cause and effect. It is the teaching that for every action there is a result, and that the nature of the result is intrinsically linked to the nature of the action. In the ancient Pali language, this principle is called Hetuphala. Hetu means cause or seed. Phala means fruit or effect. The law of karma is simply the law of Hetuphala, the law of cause and fruit. It is not a doctrine to be believed in so much as a reality to be observed, a pattern woven into the very fabric of existence. At its core, this law operates with the same reliable consistency as the laws of agriculture. If you go to a field and plant the seed of an apple tree will eventually grow. From that seed, you will never get a thorny vine. You will never get a poisonous mushroom. You will get an apple tree. Conversely, if you plant the seed of a toxic nightshade berry, a poisonous plant will grow. It will not, through wishful thinking or prayer, transform into a stalk of sweet corn. The fruit is contained within the seed. The result is inherent in the cause. This is the fundamental logic of karma. Wholesome actions, actions born of kindness, generosity, and wisdom, are wholesome seeds. When planted, they will naturally, in their own time, mature into wholesome fruits, experiences of happiness, peace, and well-being. Unwholesome actions, actions born of greed, hatred, and confusion, are poisonous seeds. When planted, they will just as naturally mature into poisonous fruits, experiences of pain, conflict, and suffering. It is crucial to understand that this is not a moral judgment. The soil of the universe does not reward the apple seed or punish the nightshade seed. It simply provides the conditions for each seed to express its own intrinsic nature. The law of karma does not reward or punish you. It simply reflects your own actions back to you with perfect, unwavering fidelity. Let us imagine two farmers, both tending to their own plot of land. The first farmer is foolish. He sits on his porch day after day, looking out at his empty, unplowed field. He prays to the sky for rain. He begs the gods for a bountiful harvest. When no crops appear, he grows angry. He curses the soil for being barren. He blames the sun for being too harsh. He laments his bad fortune. He sees himself as a victim, at the mercy of unpredictable external forces. His life is a cycle of wishful thinking, followed by bitter disappointment. The second farmer is wise. He does not waste his energy on prayers or blame. He understands the laws of nature. He knows that a harvest is not a gift, but a result. So he gets to work. He carefully chooses the best seeds he can find, the causes, the hetu. He diligently prepares the soil, removing rocks and weeds. He provides water and nutrients the supportive conditions, the pratyaya. He protects the young sprouts from pests and disease. He works in harmony with the laws of nature, not in opposition to them. He knows that if he performs the right actions with skill and diligence, the harvest, the fruit, the failure will come as a natural consequence. He is not a victim of his field. He is its co-creator. Now, which farmer are you? In the field of your own life, in the garden of your own mind, how do you operate? Do you live like the foolish farmer, constantly looking outside of yourself, blaming your unhappiness on your job, your relationships, your past, the state of the world? Do you hope for peace of mind without ever cultivating it? Or are you willing to become the wise farmer? Are you willing to accept that the quality of your life's harvest depends entirely on the quality of the seeds you are planting, right here, right now? This shift in perspective is the beginning of all true spiritual work. It is the move from a passive, reactive stance of victimhood to an active, empowered stance of radical responsibility. It is the realization that things are not happening to you, they are arising from you. To cultivate our gardens skillfully, we must first understand where the seeds are planted. What constitutes an action? A cause. In the Buddhist view, karma is created through three channels, three gates through which our will flows out into the world. The first is the gate of the body, or kaya kamma. These are our physical actions. The act of striking another person is a cause. The act of offering a gentle, helping hand is also a cause. The act of stealing is a cause. The act of giving is a cause. These are the most visible and obvious ways we interact with the world and create karmic imprints. Every physical action, From the smallest gesture to the most significant undertaking is a seed being sown. The second is the gate of speech, or vachi, kamma. We often underestimate the power of our words, but from a karmic perspective, they are immensely potent seeds. A lie that damages another's reputation is a powerful cause. Harsh words spoken in anger that create division and hostility are powerful causes. Idle, mindless gossip that cheapens discourse and wastes mental energy is a cause. Conversely, speaking the truth, even when it is difficult, is a wholesome cause. Words that are kind, that unify people, that heal wounds and inspire hope, are profoundly wholesome causes. A single word can plant a seed of joy or a seed of despair in another's heart and in our own. The wise farmer is as careful with his words as he is with his actions. The third gate is the most subtle, the most hidden, and by far the most important. It is the gate of the mind, or mano kamma. This is the realm of our thoughts, our desires, our motivations, our intentions. The Buddha stated that the mind is the forerunner of all things. Before a word is spoken, before a body moves, a thought has already arisen. The mind is the source, the spring from which the rivers of speech and action flow. You can be sitting perfectly still, silent in a quiet room, but if your mind is churning with thoughts of resentment, jealousy, lust, or ill will, you are actively, powerfully sowing unwholesome seeds. You are planting weeds in the very heart of your garden. Inversely, the silent cultivation of goodwill is one of the most powerful actions you can perform. To sit quietly and radiate thoughts of loving kindness to all beings, to genuinely cultivate forgiveness for those who have wronged you, to reflect on compassion for those who are suffering. These are profoundly wholesome causes. They are seeds of light planted directly into the root system of your consciousness. This is why the practice of meditation is so central to the Buddhist path. It is the act of becoming the wise farmer of the mind, of learning to observe which seeds are sprouting, and consciously choosing to cultivate the ones that lead to peace, and to gently uproot the ones that lead to suffering. This is the law of Hetufala. It is not mystical. It is a natural principle, operating impersonally and consistently through our body, our speech, and most importantly, our mind. It asks us to see the world not as a series of disconnected, random events, but as a seamless, interconnected tapestry of causes and their inevitable effects. We are not merely observers of this tapestry, we are its principal weavers. Every moment, with every thought, every word, every deed, we are choosing the color and texture of the thread we weave into the grand design. This understanding strips away all excuses. It dissolves all blame. It leaves us standing in the clear, bright light of our own creative power. And it leads us directly to the next, most crucial question. If the mind is the source, and action is a seed, what is the vital, life-giving germ inside that seed? What is the one element that gives an action its karmic potency? The answer lies in the power of intention. If the law of cause and effect is the mechanics of karma, then intention is its heart. It is the vital spark, the animating force that gives an action its ethical color and its karmic weight. This is not a later interpretation or a minor detail. It is the explicit, radical declaration made by the Buddha himself. In a teaching that cuts through all externalism and ritual, he stated it with breathtaking clarity. It is intention, O monks, that I call karma. Having intended, one acts through body, speech, and mind. This single statement is a revolution in understanding human responsibility. It shifts the entire focus of morality from the observable, outward action to the invisible, inner world of the mind. It tells us that the universe does not respond to what we do, so much as why we do it. The volition, the will, the mental urge that precedes and directs our every move. This is the seed. Everything else is just the movement of the wind that scatters it. To grasp the profound implication of this, let us imagine two scenes unfolding in two different places, but with one startling similarity. In the first scene, we are in a bright, sterile operating theater. A surgeon, her face a mask of concentration, holds a scalpel. With a steady hand, she makes a deep incision into the body of the patient lying before her. She cuts through skin, through muscle, exposing the organs within. This is an act of physical violence. Now, let us shift to our second scene. A dark, rain-slicked alleyway. A thief, his eyes wide with aggression and fear, holds a knife. He lunges at a victim, plunging the blade into their side. This, too, is an act of physical violence. Externally, the two actions are shockingly similar. Two sharp blades, two human bodies being cut. An observer who knew nothing of the context might struggle to tell them apart. But from the perspective of karma, they are not just different, they are universes apart. They will produce fruits as different as light is from darkness. Why? Because of the intention, the cetana, that moves the hand holding the blade. The surgeon's intention is rooted in what the Buddhist tradition calls karuna, or compassion. Her deepest wish is to alleviate suffering, to remove a sickness, to heal a wound, to restore a person to health and happiness. Her mind is focused, disciplined, and aimed entirely at the well-being of another. The act of cutting is merely the necessary, skillful means to achieve a compassionate end. It is a profoundly wholesome action, planting a seed of immense positive potential. The thief's intention, however, is rooted in the unwholesome states of lobha, or greed, and dosa, or hatred. He is driven by a desperate craving for money and an aggressive aversion to the person who stands in his way. His mind is agitated, selfish, and aimed at causing harm for personal gain. His action, though physically similar to the surgeon's, is a profoundly unwholesome one, a seed of immense suffering for himself and for his victim. The law of karma, being an impersonal natural law, does not see the blade, it sees the heart. It registers the quality of the volition, and it is from this quality that the future result will spring. To understand our own actions, we must learn to look deeply at the roots of our intentions. Buddhist psychology provides a clear and practical map for this. It teaches that all our intentions, all our volitions, spring from one of a few fundamental roots, or hetu. The unwholesome actions, the ones that lead to suffering, are said to have three primary roots. The first is greed, or lobha, grasping mind, the insatiable hunger for more. This isn't just greed for money, but for status, for pleasure, for praise, for experiences, the constant feeling of I need or I want. The second root is hatred or aversion, dosa. This is the mind that pushes away, that rejects and wishes to destroy. It manifests as anger, irritation, resentment, jealousy, and ill will. The third, and most fundamental unwholesome root, is delusion or ignorance, moha. This is the deep underlying confusion about the nature of reality. It is the failure to see that all things are impermanent, interconnected, and lack a solid, independent self. It is this delusion that convinces us that our happiness can be permanently secured by satisfying our greed or destroying the object of our aversion. Conversely, all wholesome actions, the ones that lead to peace and genuine happiness, also arise from three corresponding roots. The first is non-greed, or alobha. This is the mind of generosity, of letting go, of contentment. It is the ability to give freely without expecting anything in return. The second is non-hatred, or adosa. This is the mind of loving kindness, or metta. It is patience, forgiveness, and the genuine wish for all beings, including oneself, to be happy and well. The third wholesome root is non-delusion, or amoha. This is wisdom, or paññātha, clear seeing of reality as it is. It is the understanding that true happiness comes not from grasping and rejecting, but from inner cultivation and freedom. This framework helps us solve a common puzzle. Why do our seemingly good deeds sometimes fail to bring us peace? The answer almost always lies in the intention. Imagine a revered spiritual teacher walking on his daily alms round. A wealthy merchant sees him approaching and thinks, "This is a perfect opportunity. I will make a great donation, and everyone in the town will see how pious and generous I am. My reputation will soar." He instructs his servant to give a large quantity of fine food to the teacher. The action, on the surface, is a good deed, but the intention is rooted in lobha, the greed for reputation, and moha, the delusion that merit is a commodity to be purchased. A little further down the road, a poor elderly woman sees the same teacher. Her heart fills with a spontaneous feeling of joy and reverence. She has nothing to offer but a simple bowl of clean water she was about to drink. With a mind full of pure respect and loving kindness, with no thought of reward or recognition, she offers the water to him. From the perspective of karma, which offering carries more weight? Which seed is more pure? Without a doubt, it is the bowl of water. The merchant's grand gesture was tainted by ego. The woman's humble offering was an act of pure, unadulterated goodwill. Its karmic fruit will be correspondingly sweeter and more profound. We can see this principle at work in our own lives every single day. When we apologize to our partner, are we doing it to end the uncomfortable argument? Or are we doing it with a genuine, heartfelt remorse and a desire to heal the connection? When we work hard at our job, is it driven by a fear of being fired, an aversion to poverty, or is it driven by a genuine sense of purpose and a desire to contribute skillfully? When we compliment a friend, is it a sincere expression of our appreciation, or is there a subtle hope that they will compliment us in return? To practice mindfulness is to become a scientist of our own intentions, to watch these subtle motivations arise without judgment, and to gently, patiently cultivate the wholesome roots and let the unwholesome ones wither from lack of attention. This is how we begin to consciously shape our destiny. We learn that it is not enough to simply do good things. We must strive to do them with a good heart, for the heart is the soil and the intention is the seed. And the law of cause and effect ensures, with perfect precision, that the harvest will always match the seed that was planted. But once these seeds of intention are sown, what becomes of them? Where do they reside as they wait for the right conditions to ripen? This leads us to the mystery of the mind itself, as a storehouse for all of our karmic potentials. We arrive now at one of the deepest sources of our confusion. If karma is a simple law of cause and effect, why is its operation so rarely simple to observe? We perform a kind act, and yet our day is filled with difficulty. We see a person act with cruelty, and yet they seem to prosper without consequence. The seeds of our actions do not always sprout before our eyes, and this apparent delay, this gap between the cause and the effect, can lead us to doubt the very existence of the law itself. It can make the world feel random and fundamentally unfair. To resolve this, we must go deeper into the ancient Buddhist map of the mind, to a concept that is both profound and beautiful in its explanatory power. We must ask the question, when we plant a karmic seed with our intention, where does it go? The answer is that it is deposited into the deepest, most foundational level of our consciousness. This level is known in the Yogacara school of Buddhist thought as the alaya vijnana. Let us gently break this term apart. Vijnana means consciousness, the capacity of knowing or awareness. Alaya is a rich and evocative word that means a storehouse, a repository, a foundation. Thus, the alaya vijnana is the storehouse consciousness. It is conceived as a vast, silent, and boundless field that lies beneath the turbulent surface of our waking mind. If our everyday thoughts, emotions, and perceptions are the crashing waves we see on the surface of the ocean, the alaya is the deep, dark, unfathomable abyss beneath them, containing the entire history of the water itself. It is not our personal subconscious in the Western psychological sense, which is often seen as a dark cellar of repressed desires and traumas. The alaya is perfectly neutral. It is simply the keeper of records. Its nature is to receive and to store, without judgment, every single impression, every experience, every trace of our existence. Every time we act from a place of intention, whether through body, speech, or mind, that action creates an energetic imprint. This imprint perfumes or stains the storehouse consciousness. This energetic potential, this latent trace left by our volition, is called a bija, which translates simply as seed. When you think a thought of generosity, a bija of generosity is deposited into the alaya. When you speak a word of anger, a bija of anger is deposited. When you perform an act of patience, a seed of patience is stored. The thought, the word, the act itself may vanish in an instant. You forget it a moment later. But the seed, the karmic potential, is now part of your deepest consciousness. It does not decay. It does not disappear. It simply waits. This process is happening ceaselessly, moment by moment, with every flicker of our awareness. We are, all of us, continuously sowing millions of these seeds into the vast field of our own being. creating a rich and complex karmic soil that is uniquely our own. To make this less abstract, let us use a story. Imagine you are the current keeper of an ancient and infinitely vast warehouse. This warehouse stretches beyond the horizon in every direction, and it is filled with countless trillions of tiny sealed jars. Each jar contains a single seed. The collection is staggering in its variety. There are seeds for the most beautiful and fragrant flowers, seeds for nourishing grains and sweet fruits. There are also seeds for tangled, thorny weeds, for poisonous mushrooms, and for bitter, inedible herbs. You did not put most of these seeds here. You inherited the warehouse and its entire contents from a long, unbroken line of previous keepers who stretch back into the mists of time. You don't have an inventory. You have no idea what most of these jars contain. As you go about your daily life, you occasionally add a new jar to the collection. You perform an act of impatience, and a new seed of a thorny weed is stored in a dusty corner. You show a moment of genuine compassion, and a seed for a beautiful rose is placed on a shelf. For the most part, the warehouse is dark and quiet. The seeds lie dormant. But one day, a specific and rare combination of conditions manifests in the world outside. A particular quality of sunlight shines through a crack in the roof, a specific amount of moisture seeps up from the ground, and the temperature is just right. These conditions are perfect for a seed that was placed in a jar by a keeper 500 years ago. Deep in a forgotten aisle of the warehouse, the jar cracks. The seed sprouts. A strange and powerful vine begins to grow with incredible speed, breaking through the floorboards and erupting into your world. You are shocked. Where did this come from? You cry. I did nothing to deserve this vine. You are right, in a limited sense. You, the current keeper, did not plant it, but it came from your warehouse. It is the fruit, the phala, of a seed, the bija, that has been part of your continuum, lying dormant in the storehouse, the alaya, waiting patiently through the centuries for this exact set of circumstances, the pratyaya, to bring it to life. This brings us to the final, crucial element. A seed, no matter how potent, needs conditions to sprout. These supportive conditions are known as pratyaya. This explains one of life's great mysteries, why different people react so differently to the same event. Imagine two people are walking down the street, and someone accidentally bumps into them, hard. The first person, whose storehouse consciousness has very few seeds of anger, simply steadies himself, says no problem, and continues on his way. The external event, the bump, was not a strong enough condition to activate anything within him. The second person, however, has a rich deposit of anger seeds in his alaya, perhaps planted through years of frustration and resentment. For him, the same bump acts like a floodlight and a nourishing rain on a fertile seed. An explosive, seemingly disproportionate rage erupts from him. He begins to shout. His face turns red, his fists clench. The rage did not come from the bump. The bump was merely the trigger, the pratyaya. The rage itself grew from the bija that was already present, waiting, in his own mind. This is a dynamic and continuous feedback loop. When the second man explodes in anger, his angry thoughts, his harsh words, his aggressive posture, these are all new actions, new intentions. And every single one of them plants a fresh batch of anger, seeds back into the alaya, reinforcing the tendency, making it even more likely that a future trigger will set off the same reaction. This is how karmic habits, addictions, and neurotic patterns become so deeply entrenched. But in this dynamic lies the very key to our freedom, for we have a choice. When the trigger event happens, we can, with training and mindfulness, create a space. We can notice the anger beginning to arise, and we can choose not to water that seed. We can choose not to identify with it, not to feed it with more angry thoughts. And in that space, we can consciously choose to plant a different seed. We can plant a seed of patience, of understanding, of forgiveness. In doing so, we begin the slow, patient work of changing the entire ecosystem of our minds. We cannot instantly remove all the old seeds from the warehouse, but we can stop planting new weeds, and we can start cultivating a garden of flowers. This profound model of the mind, as a storehouse of karmic potentials, beautifully explains the latency period between cause and effect. And now, it allows us to ask our next question. What are the different ways in which these seeds can ripen into the full-blown fruits that define our experience of the world. We have journeyed into the hidden depths of the mind, into the silent, vast storehouse where the seeds of our intentions are kept. We have seen how every thought, word, and deed deposits a latent energy, a bija, that waits patiently for the right conditions to sprout. This explains where our karmic potential resides. But now we confront the most challenging question of all, the question of when. The apparent chaos of the world, the seeming injustice that sparked our inquiry, is almost entirely a riddle of timing. We live our lives through the narrow aperture of a few decades, and through this small window, we expect to see the workings of a law that is timeless. We are like a person who reads a single page of a 1,000-page novel and then declares that the plot makes no sense. To unravel this riddle, we must expand our sense of time and understand the different ways in which the fruits of karma, the vipaka, can ripen. Vipaka is the Pali word for the result, the maturation, the ripening of a karmic seed. It is the experience itself. When we feel a moment of unexpected joy, that is vipaka. When we face a sudden and difficult challenge, that is also vipaka. It is crucial to understand that the vipaka itself is simply a neutral event, the natural unfolding of a previous cause. It is the harvest appearing in the field. Our happiness or suffering does not come from the harvest itself, but from our reaction to it, from whether we greet it with wisdom and equanimity or with craving and aversion. According to the detailed map of reality provided in the Buddhist teachings, this ripening process is not uniform. It can occur across 3 distinct timetables. The first and most easily understood category is karma, that ripens in this very life. The Pali term is dittata, dhamma, vedaniya karma. This is the karma whose cause and effect are both visible within the same lifespan. These are the results we can often trace. If you consistently practice a musical instrument with diligence, the beautiful music you eventually produce is the vipaka, the ripened fruit of your effort. If you spend years treating colleagues with kindness, integrity, and generosity, the trust, friendship, and support you receive in return is the vipaka. Conversely, if a person engages in a lifestyle of excessive consumption, neglecting their physical health, the subsequent illness and lack of vitality they experience years later is the fruit of those earlier actions. This type of karma makes intuitive sense to us. It confirms our belief in a direct and observable relationship between our actions and their consequences. It is the karma that is easiest to believe in, because we can see it for ourselves. The second category, however, requires a broader perspective. It is the karma that ripens in the next life, known as upapaja vedaniya karma. To understand this, we must gently hold the idea of rebirth, not as the transmigration of a fixed, unchanging soul, but as the continuation of a stream of consciousness. Imagine a candle flame. As the candle burns down, we use it to light a new candle just before it goes out. The flame on the new candle is not the same as the flame on the old one, and yet it is not entirely different either. It is a direct continuation, causally linked to the first. In the same way, the final moment of consciousness in one life, conditioned by all the actions and habits of that life, becomes the direct cause for the first moment of consciousness in the next. Certain powerful karmic seeds, particularly those planted with great intention, or those created near the time of death, are said to ripen in this way. They set the initial conditions, the opening scene, of the next chapter. This helps to explain phenomena that are otherwise baffling. Child prodigies with astonishing innate talents, individuals born with extreme physical advantages or disadvantages, or those who seem to possess a deep, inherent kindness or a predisposition to anger from a very early age. These are not random occurrences, but the vipaka of powerful seeds from the immediately preceding life, now coming to fruition. The third category is the one that holds the key to the deepest mysteries of suffering and fortune. It is called aparaparya vedaniya karma, which means karma that ripens in subsequent future lives, at any point after the next one. This is the karma of the deep archive. These are the countless seeds, both wholesome and unwholesome, planted in the distant past, in lives we cannot remember, that lie dormant in the deepest vaults of our storehouse consciousness. They may wait for hundreds, thousands, even millions of lifetimes for the precise and often very specific set of conditions, the right time, the right place, the right encounters that will allow them to ripen. This is the karmic dark matter of our lives. It accounts for the sudden, dramatic, and seemingly unexplainable turns of fate. A person born into poverty who suddenly achieves immense wealth, or a person living a quiet life who is suddenly struck by a devastating and rare disease. These are often the manifestation, the vipaka, of powerful seeds from a forgotten past, finally meeting their moment of maturation. With this three-tiered model of timing, we can now return to our original, painful question and see it in a completely new light. The villain who thrives, the corrupt tycoon who seems to have everything, is not getting away with it. He is simply living on borrowed time, feasting on the vipaka of good deeds performed in a past life. He is like a man who has inherited a vast fortune and is spending it lavishly, all while setting fire to his own house. The pleasure he experiences is the fruit of a past cause. The destructive actions he is performing now are new causes, new poisonous seeds that will ripen in their own time, be it later in this life or in a life to come. Their painful result is absolutely certain. Conversely, the good person who suffers is not being punished for their goodness. They are experiencing the ripening of unwholesome seeds they themselves planted in a forgotten past. They are like a diligent farmer who has inherited a field full of rocks and thorns. Their present work is difficult. They must patiently clear the land, enduring cuts and exhaustion. Their current goodness is not the cause of their hardship. It is the medicine, the remedy. Every act of patience, every moment of compassion they show in the face of their difficulty is a wholesome seed being planted, ensuring that their future harvest will be beautiful and bountiful. There is a classic story from the Buddhist texts that illustrates this perfectly. Queen Malika, a woman of great faith and generosity, once told a lie to her husband, the king, to cover up a minor fault. Because the lie was told to a person of great stature, the karmic seed was heavy. It is said that when she died, this powerful, negative karma ripened first, and she experienced a brief period of suffering for 7 days. But because her life as a whole was overwhelmingly filled with goodness, generosity, and kindness, that negative vipaka was quickly exhausted. Her vast store of positive karma then ripened, and she was reborn into a state of immense happiness. This story teaches us that karma is not a simple averaging out. Different seeds have different potencies and different ripening times. A powerful seed can ripen quickly, even if it runs contrary to the general trend of our life. But ultimately, the weight and direction of our accumulated actions will determine our path. Understanding these different timetables of karmic ripening does not make suffering disappear, but it can completely transform our relationship to it. It dissolves the bitterness and the feeling of injustice. It replaces our short-sighted demand for immediate fairness with a patient long-term wisdom. We begin to see ourselves and everyone around us as complex beings, living through the intricate unfolding of causes and effects that stretch across countless lifetimes. We are all, in this moment, experiencing a mixture of fruits from our vast and varied past. This realization engenders a deep sense of compassion for ourselves and for others, but it also raises another question. We do not exist in isolation. Our lives are deeply intertwined. How does the karma of one person affect the karma of another? This brings us from the realm of the individual to the realm of the collective, to the shared karma of communities, nations, and the world itself. We have journeyed deep into the personal dimension of karma, exploring the landscape of our own minds, the seeds we plant, and the varied seasons of their ripening. We have begun to see our lives not as a series of random events, but as the coherent unfolding of a personal story, a story authored by our own past actions. But if we stop here, our understanding remains incomplete, for we do not live our stories in isolation. We are not solitary gardeners tending to private plots of land on a distant star. We are deeply, inextricably, and profoundly interconnected. Our gardens are adjacent, our water sources are shared, and the weather that affects one ultimately affects us all. To fully grasp the forces that shape our lives, we must now lift our gaze from the individual to the collective and explore the powerful concept of shared or collective karma. In the rich tapestry of Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, there is a breathtaking metaphor used to describe the nature of reality, the celestial net of the god Indra. Imagine a vast, limitless web, stretching infinitely in all directions. At every single point where the threads of the web cross, a perfect, multifaceted jewel is suspended. Each jewel is so brilliantly polished that it reflects every other jewel in the entire cosmic net. If you were to look closely into the surface of any single jewel, you would see the shimmering reflections of all the others, each of which in turn reflects all the others, and so on, into an infinity of interreflection. This is the vision of interbeing. It teaches that nothing exists on its own. Everything contains, and is contained by, everything else. Each one of us is like one of these jewels. Our existence is not separate or independent. It is a reflection of all that is, and all that is reflected in us. This vision of radical interconnectedness is the very foundation for understanding collective karma. Within this interwoven reality, we are subject to two kinds of karmic influence operating simultaneously. The first is what we have been discussing at length, known in some traditions as Biat Ingyep, or individual karma. This is the unique stream of causes and effects that belongs to our own particular continuum of consciousness. It is the sum total of the seeds in our personal storehouse, our alaya vijnana. This individual karma is what accounts for our specific personality, our innate talents and weaknesses, our unique physical appearance, and the particular family circumstances into which we are born. It is the specific color, cut, and clarity of our individual jewel in Indra's net. But at the same time, we are all part of a larger pattern. We are subject to kongyip, or collective karma. This is the shared karmic fruit that ripens from the pooled actions and intentions of a group. This group can be as small as a family, or as large as a city, a corporation, a nation, or even the entire human species. Collective karma creates the environment we share, our culture, our language, our economic systems, our political climate, and the health of our natural world. If individual karma is the nature of the specific plant, collective karma is the quality of the soil, the air, and the water that all plants in that field must share. Our lived experience is a constant, dynamic interplay between these two forces. A person may have excellent individual karma. They may be born with a sharp mind, a healthy body, and a naturally compassionate disposition, a beautiful, healthy seed. But if that seed is planted in a field with toxic collective karma, for example, if they are born into a society ravaged by war, systemic poverty, or deep-seated racial injustice, their ability to thrive will be severely constrained. Their personal goodness does not make them immune to the shared suffering of their environment. We see this with painful clarity in our modern world. Consider a person who is meticulously mindful of the environment. They recycle diligently, consume consciously, and never litter. Their individual karma in this regard is impeccable. Yet, if they live in a city where the collective karma of millions has led to rampant industrial pollution, they must still breathe the same poisoned air as everyone else. Their personal virtue cannot create a private bubble of clean oxygen for them to breathe. They are part of a shared reality, a shared vipaka of the group's collective actions. The same principle applies to social and economic structures. An honest entrepreneur with excellent individual karma may struggle to keep her business afloat within a national economy built on corrupt collective karma. A peace-loving citizen may be forced to experience the horrors of war, a collective karmic result generated by the aggressive decisions of their nation's leaders. The global climate crisis is perhaps the most powerful and urgent example of collective karma we face today. The accumulated actions of generations, driven by collective greed and delusion, have created a shared reality of extreme weather, rising sea levels, and ecological instability that affects every being on the planet, regardless of their individual karmic purity. There is a simple, ancient parable that makes this principle unforgettable. Imagine a group of people traveling together in a large boat across a vast ocean. The boat is their shared reality, their collective environment. One of the passengers decides that he is uncomfortable and wants to make more space for himself. He takes out a drill and begins to bore a hole in the floor of the boat, right beneath his own seat. The other passengers see what he is doing and cry out in alarm. "What are you doing? Stop! You will endanger us all." The man looks up, annoyed. "What are you worried about?" he says. "This is my own private space beneath my own seat. I am only drilling a hole here. It has nothing to do with you." The profound foolishness of his statement is obvious to everyone but him. As the water begins to pour in through the hole, the entire boat begins to sink, taking all the passengers with it, including the man with the drill. We are all passengers on this boat. Our planet is our boat. Our society is our boat. The delusion that our actions are private matters, that we can drill a hole in our little corner of reality without affecting everyone else, is the great ignorance that fuels so much collective suffering. Understanding collective karma is the antidote to this delusion. It calls us to a higher and broader form of responsibility. It tells us that our own liberation is deeply tied to the liberation of all. We must not only tend to our own garden, but we must also work to purify the soil and the water that we all share. To contemplate this vast interwoven web of causes and affects our own individual karma, stretching back through countless lives, interacting with the collective karma of billions of other beings can be humbling and even overwhelming. It can make our own efforts seem small, like a single drop of fresh water falling into a polluted ocean. It can lead to a sense of fatalism, a feeling that we are simply caught in these immense impersonal currents, powerless to change our course. But is this true? Can a single person, faced with the weight of their own past and the power of the collective, truly transform their destiny? The Buddhist tradition answers this with a clear and resounding yes. To show us how, it offers not just theories, but living examples. We will now turn to one of the most dramatic stories of transformation in the entire Buddhist canon, the story of a man who was the embodiment of negative karma and who proved, through his own effort, that no one is ever truly lost. The sheer scale of karma, with its individual and collective threads woven across countless lifetimes, can feel crushing. It can seem to paint a picture of a deterministic universe, a reality where we are but puppets, dancing on strings pulled by a past too vast to comprehend and too distant to remember. Are we then simply prisoners of our own history? Is there a karmic point of no return, a moral horizon beyond which a soul is forever lost in darkness? It is a terrifying thought, one that can lead to a sense of profound hopelessness. But to this very fear, the Buddhist tradition offers a clear, dramatic, and deeply compassionate answer, not in the form of abstract theory, but through the living narrative of a man who journeyed to the deepest pit of human depravity and found his way back to the light. This is the story of Angulimala, a name that once inspired terror and now serves as an eternal beacon of hope. In the time of the Buddha, the kingdom of Kosala was paralyzed by fear. A shadow had fallen over its forests and roads. A killer, more monster than man, was stalking the land, slaughtering indiscriminately. His name was Angulimala, a name that meant finger garland, for it was said he wore a gruesome necklace made from the severed fingers of his victims. He was not a common bandit who killed for gain, nor a soldier who killed for duty. He was a force of pure terror, a whirlwind of violence who had murdered 999 people. He was seeking his 1000th victim to complete a dark initiation given to him by a misguided teacher. To the people of Kosala, Angulimala was the living embodiment of evil, a demon in human form. He represented the absolute extremity of negative karma, a man so steeped in blood and hatred that he seemed utterly beyond redemption. Hearing the cries of his people, the Buddha made a decision that seemed incomprehensible to everyone. He announced that he would walk, alone, into the forest where Angulimala was hiding. The villagers pleaded with him not to go. King Pasenadi himself implored the Buddha to turn back, offering him an armed escort. The Buddha gently declined. With nothing but his simple robes and his alms bowl radiating a palpable aura of peace, he set off down the forest path. It was not long before Angulimala spotted him. At last, he thought, here is my final victim. Even the king's soldiers dare not travel this road, yet this lone ascetic walks here as if taunting me. Seizing his weapons, the murderer began to run after the calm, slowly walking monk. And then, a strange miracle occurred. Though the Buddha continued to walk at a normal, unhurried pace, Angulimala, running with all his ferocious might, could not close the distance between them. He pushed himself harder and harder, his lungs burning, his legs aching, but the serene figure of the monk remained just out of reach. Exhausted, enraged, and utterly bewildered, Angulimala finally roared, "Stop, ascetic! Stop!" The Buddha, without breaking his stride, replied in a voice that was perfectly calm, yet resonated with immense power, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." The words struck Angulimala like a bolt of lightning. What could they mean? This man was clearly still walking, while he, Angulimala, had been forced to a halt. In that moment of profound confusion, a new kind of awareness dawned in his mind. He suddenly understood. The Buddha had stopped in a way that was far more fundamental. He had stopped all acts of killing, all acts of harming. He had stepped off the frantic, spinning wheel of violence and retribution. It was Angulimala who was still running, trapped in an endless cycle of hatred, fear, and the creation of suffering. The simple truth of the Buddha's statement shattered the entire foundation of his worldview. All the rage, all the pride, all the delusion that had driven him for so long collapsed in an instant. He threw his weapons to the ground, fell to his knees before the Buddha, and wept, begging to be shown a different way. And here, the story reveals a compassion as profound as the Buddha's wisdom. Looking at the blood-soaked killer kneeling before him, the Buddha saw not a monster, but a suffering being with the potential for awakening. Without hesitation, he welcomed Angulimala into the monastic community. Angulimala's hair and beard were shaved, his gruesome garland was discarded, and he was given the simple saffron robes of a monk. The transformation was absolute. The man who was once the terror of a kingdom now walked with a quiet dignity, his mind dedicated to the arduous practice of meditation and self-purification. But karma, as we have learned, is a natural law, and the seeds that Angulimala had planted, 999 seeds of unimaginable violence, had to bear their fruit. His awakening did not magically erase the consequences of his actions. This is the most crucial part of his story. When the now venerable Angulimala would go on his daily alms round into the very villages he once terrorized, the people would react with fear and fury. They saw the robes, but they could not forget the murderer. They would shout insults at him. They would throw rocks, garbage, and sticks. Day after day, he would return to the monastery, his bowl often empty, his body bruised and bleeding, his robes torn. Yet, his mind remained perfectly serene. He felt new anger, new resentment, new self-pity. He understood. One day, after a particularly brutal reception from a village, he came before the Buddha, his head bleeding from a thrown stone. The Buddha looked at him with great compassion and said, "Bear it, Brahman, bear it. You are experiencing in this very life the ripening of those deeds for which you might have been tormented in hell for countless ages." In that moment, the entire law of karma is illuminated. The physical pain, the public humiliation, this was the vipaka, the inevitable karmic fruit of his past. It was a debt that had to be paid, but because his mind had been transformed, because he no longer reacted with hatred, he was not planting any new seeds of suffering. He was experiencing the pain of the first arrow, the karmic result, without shooting himself with the second arrow of mental anguish. His heart was free, the debt was being cleared, and he was creating no new liabilities. Eventually, through his unwavering practice, Angulimala purified his mind so completely that he became an arhat, a fully awakened being, and entered into the final peace of nirvana. The story of Angulimala is a testament to three profound truths. First, our actions have real consequences. Karma is not a metaphor, the bill always comes due. Second, the past does not define the future. No matter how many unwholesome seeds we have planted, the present moment always offers the opportunity to plant a different kind of seed. The power to change resides entirely in the here and now. And third, karma is not a permanent sentence. We are not our worst actions. We are our capacity for transformation. The path from murderer to saint is a testament to the boundless potential for awakening that lies within every single being. If a man like Angulimala, who stood at the very nadir of human conduct, could achieve liberation, then who is truly beyond hope? And this leads us to question our own rigid labels. If the most evil of men can become a saint, what then does it truly mean to be a good person? Are our definitions as solid as we think they are? The story of Angulimala, the murderer who became a saint, does more than just offer hope. It acts as a powerful solvent, dissolving the hard, brittle categories we use to make sense of the world. His journey fundamentally destabilizes our concepts of good and bad, forcing us to question the very foundation of our inquiry. We began by asking, why do bad things happen to good people? We have spent time examining the nature of bad things, reframing them as the neutral, impersonal ripening of karmic seeds. Now, we must turn the lens with equal intensity upon the second half of our question. We must have the courage to ask, What do we truly mean by a good person? The Buddhist perspective suggests that this very label, this simple, well-intentioned classification, is itself a primary source of our confusion. We are applying a static definition to a reality that is fluid, complex, and constantly in flux. From a Buddhist standpoint, there is no such thing as a person who is inherently or absolutely good or bad. These are not fixed essences. Instead, each being is understood as a dynamic process, a continuous stream of consciousness. Imagine standing on the bank of a great river. One day, after a season of gentle rains in the mountains, the water flows past you, clear and sparkling, full of life. You look at it and declare, "This is a clean river." The next day, a storm far upstream churns up mud and silt, and the same river now flows past you, murky, brown, and turbulent. You look at it and say, "This is a dirty river." A week later, in a drought, it becomes a slow, shallow trickle. Was your initial assessment wrong? Was the river lying to you? Number. The river is simply being a river. It is a process, constantly changing its expression based on a vast web of causes and conditions, most of which are happening far out of your sight. Its fundamental nature is water, but its quality is never fixed. We, as human beings, are exactly like this river. Our stream of consciousness is not a single static thing. It is a flow of countless, ever-changing mental states. In one moment, our mind stream can be clear, sparkling with thoughts of kindness, generosity, and compassion. In the next moment, triggered by some external event, it can become murky with greed, turbulent with anger, or sluggish with despair. To witness a person acting with consistent kindness and then label them a good person is like seeing a clear stretch of the river and labeling the entire waterway clean for all time. It is a snapshot, not the whole story. It mistakes a temporary condition for a permanent identity. This leads us to the next layer of complexity. Our perception of any person is incredibly limited. What we see of them in this life is merely the tip of a colossal karmic iceberg. The vast majority of their story, the immense accumulation of causes and conditions from their past, lies invisible beneath the surface of the present moment. We meet a man who is a pillar of his community, unfailingly honest, patient, and kind. We rightly admire his current actions and place upon him the label of a good person. Then one day, he is struck by a sudden, tragic illness. Our world is shaken. How can this be? We ask. This makes no sense. He did nothing to deserve this. From a karmic perspective, there is no contradiction here. We are witnessing the ripening of a seed from the unseen part of his karmic inheritance. Perhaps many lifetimes ago, this same being, in a different body and under different circumstances, committed acts that caused great harm. The seeds of those actions were deposited deep within his storehouse consciousness and have lain dormant for eons, waiting for the precise convergence of conditions in this present life to finally sprout. This does not, in any way, invalidate or diminish his present goodness. His current kindness, honesty, and patience are powerful, wholesome seeds that he is planting now. Seeds that will undoubtedly bear sweet fruit in his future. But his present experience is a composite, a blending of the fruits of his distant past and the seeds of his immediate present. To ignore the existence of the unseen past is to read only the final chapter of a book and then be baffled by the characters' situations. We are all living out chapters that were set in motion long before our current story began. Furthermore, the label good is not only limited by time, but it is also often a gross oversimplification of a person's character in the present. Human beings are not monoliths, we are mosaics. Consider a woman who is famous for her philanthropy. She gives millions to charity, funds hospitals, and supports the arts. By all public measures, she is a good person. But perhaps, in her private life, this same woman is consumed by jealousy, speaks with cruel words to her family, or harbors a deep-seated arrogance that makes her dismissive of those she considers beneath her. Her acts of public generosity are indeed planting wholesome seeds. But her private jealousy, her harsh speech, her arrogancies are also powerful, unwholesome seeds being planted simultaneously. The law of karma is precise. It responds to each of these actions individually. It does not average them out and grant her a passing grade. The seeds of generosity will ripen as fortune and good reputation. The seeds of harsh speech will ripen as conflict and painful relationships. The seeds of arrogance will ripen as loneliness and a lack of genuine connection. When this woman experiences strife in her family, we might be confused if we only see her public persona. But from a holistic viewpoint, it makes perfect sense. She is simply harvesting from all the different parts of the garden she has been planting. This brings us to the danger of the label itself. By creating these rigid, simplistic categories of good people, we set ourselves up for disappointment. We place our friends, our family, even ourselves, upon a fragile pedestal of perfection. We create a brittle, unrealistic expectation. Good things should happen to this person, and bad things should not. When reality, in its infinite complexity, inevitably fails to honor our simple rule, our conceptual framework shatters, and this shattering is the very experience of disillusionment, bitterness, and the feeling of cosmic injustice. The Buddhist path invites us to do something much wiser and more compassionate. It asks us to release these labels. Instead of seeing a good person, we can practice seeing a being who, like me, is a complex stream of wholesome and unwholesome states. We can see a being who is currently cultivating many beautiful qualities, while also experiencing the results of actions from a past I cannot see. This subtle shift in language initiates a monumental shift in perspective. It replaces the demand for perfection with a deep and gentle compassion. It replaces the shock of disappointment with a patient, wise curiosity. When we stop seeing people as static objects to be labeled and start seeing them as dynamic processes on a long and arduous journey, our hearts open. We no longer need the universe to conform to our childish rules of fairness. We can begin to accept reality on its own complex terms. This new way of seeing, viewing a person as a flowing river of consciousness moving through time, prepares us to accept one of the most challenging ideas in this entire exploration. It allows us to look squarely at the role of the invisible past, and to consider that the causes for many of the inexplicable events in our lives today may lie in a chapter of our own story that was written long, long ago. Having set aside the fragile label of the good person and embraced the image of a flowing river of consciousness, we must now confront the true scale of this river. We must ask, how far back does it stretch? If we diligently search for the cause of every event in our lives, only within the narrow confines of this single existence, from the day of our birth until this present moment, we will inevitably be confronted with profound and painful mysteries. We will find effects for which we can locate no cause. A child born into a loving family with a debilitating genetic disorder, a gifted musician who dies in a senseless accident, a person haunted by a paralyzing phobia of water, despite never having had a traumatic experience with it in this life. From a purely materialistic, single life perspective, these events can only be attributed to the cold, random lottery of chance, or seen as a terrible flaw in the fabric of reality. But what if our perspective is too limited? What if we are trying to understand a vast landscape by looking through a tiny keyhole? The great contemplative traditions of the world, Buddhism among them, offer a more expansive view. They suggest that our present life is not the whole story. It is not a self-contained sprint from birth to death, but rather a single chapter in a book of epic length. To understand this, we must gently approach the idea of rebirth, or samsara. It is essential to release the popular cartoon image of a little unchanging soul entity that hops from one body to another, like a person changing clothes. The Buddhist teaching is far more subtle and profound. It speaks not of a fixed self, but of a continuous stream of consciousness, a current of karmic energy. Think again of one candle flame being used to light another. The flame on the new candle is not identical to the old one, but it is not completely different either. It exists only because of the first flame. It is its direct, causal continuation. In the same way, the final moment of consciousness in one life, conditioned by all the actions, habits, and unresolved karmic energies of that existence, becomes the cause for the very first moment of consciousness in a new life. There is no permanent me that carries over, only the unbroken continuity of cause and effect. When we view our life through this lens, as a single chapter in a very long book, the plot begins to make a different kind of sense. The situations we find ourselves in at the beginning of this chapter family, our country, our innate physical and mental characteristics, are not random. They are deeply conditioned by the events of previous chapters. The reason a character in chapter 32 has a deep and inexplicable fear of heights might only be understood by reading about their fall from a cliff in chapter 7. We, the readers of our own lives, have simply forgotten the earlier chapters. We have opened the book to the current page and are trying to understand everything based on this single snapshot, bewildered by the complex relationships and deep-seated motivations we find here. This perspective, that the causes of our present circumstances may lie in a forgotten past, is not offered as an excuse for resignation. It is not a fatalistic doctrine meant to make us throw up our hands and say, well, this suffering must be from a past life, so there's nothing I can do. It is the precise opposite. It is a diagnostic tool that can liberate us from a futile and frustrating search for causes where they cannot be found. If a person is suffering from a chronic anxiety that has no apparent cause in this life, they can spend years blaming their parents, their chemistry, or themselves, all to no avail. But to consider that this anxiety might be a karmic echo, a vipaka of fear-inducing actions from a past life, can be profoundly freeing. It allows them to stop the cycle of blame and focus their energy where it actually has power, on the cultivation of peace, stability, and loving kindness in the present moment. This expanded view illuminates many of life's enigmas. The child prodigy who plays Mozart flawlessly at the age of 5 is not a genetic miracle, so much as a being whose consciousness stream contains the powerful, ripened seeds of countless hours of practice from a previous chapter. The immediate and intense affinity or aversion we feel for certain people we have just met can be seen as the continuation of deep karmic connections from past lives, our storehouse consciousness recognizing an ancient friend or foe, and the most painful events, the senseless tragedies that befall people who have lived exemplary lives, can be understood not as a punishment or a mistake, but as the late ripening of a powerful, unwholesome seed planted in a distant, forgotten past. Imagine a person who has suffered for years from a mysterious, chronic illness. They are a kind and health-conscious individual. They have seen every doctor, tried every conceivable treatment, but no one can find a physical cause. Their medical tests are all normal, yet their pain is real. They are sinking into a deep despair, feeling cursed by a random, unjust universe. In their search, they visit a wise and compassionate meditation master. The master listens to their story with great care and then says, "The body is the physical manifestation of the stream of consciousness." Sometimes, the root of an illness is not in the flesh and blood of this chapter, but in an action performed in a previous one. It is possible that the seed for this suffering was an act of harm committed long ago. The patient's heart sinks. "So I am doomed," they say. "No," the master replies gently, "you are diagnosed. When a doctor tells you the name of a disease, you are not doomed. You are finally able to seek the right medicine. The conventional medicine for the body has not worked because the root of the cause is not in the body. The medicine, therefore, must be for the mind. It must be a karmic medicine. The master does not prescribe a pill, but a practice. Every day, he says, sit quietly and cultivate the intention of goodwill. Radiate thoughts of loving kindness to all beings without exception. Feel compassion for all who suffer, just as you are suffering now. Generate a genuine sense of forgiveness for any harm you may have ever caused, seen or unseen. This practice is not a magic cure. It is the planting of new, powerful, wholesome seeds of healing directly into the soil of your consciousness. By doing so, you create the inner conditions for the old, unwholesome seed to exhaust its energy, and you begin to cultivate a future harvest of well-being. The patient, for the first time in years, feels a sense of hope, not because the pain is gone, but because they have been given a sense of purpose and a path of action. They have moved from being a victim of their past to being the healer of their present. By expanding our view to encompass the vast continuity of our consciousness, we find a framework that is both compassionate and empowering. It acknowledges the reality of our suffering without resorting to blame or dismissing it as random chaos. It honors the complexity of our long journey, and it brings us to a crucial and deeply comforting question. If we are, at times, experiencing the painful paying of an old karmic debt, is there an intrinsic value in this process? Is the experience of suffering merely a pointless torment? Or can the act of enduring the fruit of our past have a purifying, liberating effect on our future? We have now peered into the deep past, acknowledging that the seeds of our present misfortunes may have been planted in chapters of our story we no longer remember. This realization, while offering an explanation, can feel cold and disempowering. It can seem as if we are simply living out a sentence for a crime we don't recall committing. Is there any meaning in this process? Is the experience of a painful karmic result merely the sterile, mechanical payment of an ancient debt, a pointless suffering we must endure before moving on? Or can the experience itself, the very act of meeting this bitter fruit, hold a value of its own? The Buddhist path offers a profound and deeply healing perspective that suffering does not have to be a meaningless torment. When met with wisdom, it can become a powerful, purifying fire. Let us first think of our negative karma as a kind of financial debt accumulated over many lifetimes. An unwholesome action is like taking out a loan with an exorbitant interest rate. The pleasure or gain we get from the action is temporary, but the debt is real and it grows in the shadows. The eventual arrival of misfortune, the ripening of the vipaka, is the moment the bill comes due. The debt collector is knocking at the door. Our habitual human reaction is one of fear, denial, and anger. We hide from the collector. We argue that the bill is unfair. We lament our bad luck. This resistance, this struggle against the inevitable, is the source of immense mental anguish, but a wiser perspective sees it differently. While the arrival of the bill is certainly unpleasant, the act of paying the debt is, in its essence, an act of liberation. Each payment made reduces the principal. With every portion of the debt that is cleared, we become lighter, freer. Once the final payment is made, the burden is gone forever. In the same way, when a painful karmic result manifests in our life, and we meet it with understanding, we are making a payment on our karmic debt. The seed has sprouted, its painful fruit has been born, and in the bearing of it, the seed's energy is exhausted. That specific karmic potential is now cleared from our storehouse consciousness. We are, in a very real sense, purified of that particular past action. This purification, however, involves a crucial, active component. It is not merely a passive endurance. The real transformation occurs because, in wisely meeting the old fruit, we refrain from planting new seeds of the same kind. When misfortune strikes, our untrained mind reacts instinctively with a fresh wave of unwholesome states. We experience the pain of loss, and we react with resentment. We experience the pain of illness, and we react with self-pity. We experience the pain of betrayal, and we react with hatred. Each one of these reactions, resentment, self-pity, hatredis, a brand new, poisonous seed that we plant in the very moment we are supposedly paying off an old debt. We settle one account only to immediately open another. This is the very engine of samsara, the beginningless cycle of suffering. We pay our debts with borrowed money, ensuring we are never free. The path of purification lies in breaking this chain. When the painful fruit of the past ripens, we train ourselves, through mindfulness and wisdom, to pause. We learn to acknowledge the pain without adding the second layer of mental resistance. We feel the raw sensation of loss without watering the seeds of blame. We experience the discomfort of illness without feeding the seeds of despair. By doing this, a profound alchemy takes place. The old karmic seed exhausts its energy and withers away, and no new negative seed is planted to take its place. The cycle is broken. The account for that particular karmic lineage begins to be closed, once and for all. More than just a passive cleansing, adversity can become a crucible for active spiritual growth. The qualities of a deep and resilient spirit are rarely forged in times of ease and comfort. It is the fire of hardship that tempers the soul. An easy life produces a fragile peace. A difficult life, met with wisdom, produces an unshakable one. The Buddhist tradition speaks of several key qualities, or perfections, that are cultivated specifically in the face of adversity. The first is khanti, which means patience, forbearance, and endurance. One cannot learn true patience when everything is going one's way. It is only when faced with frustrating delays, difficult people, and painful situations that we are given a genuine opportunity to practice not reacting, to practice bearing with reality as it is. Each moment we endure with patience, we strengthen that spiritual muscle. Another is virya, or persistent energetic effort. This is not the frantic energy of worldly ambition, but the quiet, courageous energy it takes to remain mindful when we are in pain, to remain compassionate when we are being treated unfairly, to keep getting up when life knocks us down. And most important of all is panya, or wisdom. The deepest insights into the nature of life are almost never born from uninterrupted happiness. It is loss that teaches us about impermanence. It is sickness that teaches us to value our life. It is the encounter with our own fragility that shatters our pride and forces us to seek a truth that is deeper than the fleeting pleasures of the world. There is a beautiful parable of a master potter working at his wheel. He takes a lump of wet clay, and with skilled, gentle hands, he coaxes it upwards into a graceful vase. But sometimes, a hidden air bubble, or a stray stone within the clay, creates a deep flaw. The vase becomes crooked, its walls weak. A novice might try to patch the flaw, ending up with a lopsided, fragile pot. The master, however, knows better. In a single, swift, and decisive motion, he smashes the flawed vase, crushing it back down into a shapeless lump of clay upon the spinning wheel. To an outsider, this act looks violent, destructive, and cruel. But it is, in fact, an act of supreme wisdom and compassion for the clay's true potential. From that same clay, now recentered, its flaw eliminated, the master begins again, and this time he shapes a vessel of even greater beauty, strength, and perfection. Great suffering can feel like this. It can feel like being smashed back down into a formless lump on the potter's wheel. Our identity, our plans, our ego, our idea of who we are is all broken. It is a terrifying and disorienting experience. But if we can trust the process, if we can surrender to the hands of the master potter, that very brokenness becomes the necessary prerequisite for our own transformation. The flaw is worked out, and we can be reshaped into something stronger, more resilient, and more beautiful than we were before. This is the radical reframing of suffering. It is no longer a meaningless punishment from an unjust universe. It becomes a profound, if painful, opportunity. It is a chance to purify the mind of old toxins, to settle ancient debts, to forge the heart into an instrument of patience and wisdom, and to allow the flawed vessel of our old self to be broken and remade. This is not to say that we should seek out suffering, but it means that when suffering, the great debt collector, inevitably knocks on our door, we do not have to greet it as an enemy. We can choose to greet it as a fierce, uncompromising, and ultimately compassionate teacher. This realization changes everything. It shifts the focus from the event itself to our response. And this leads us to what is perhaps the single most practical and liberating teaching for dealing with life's difficulties. The crucial difference between the pain life gives us and the suffering we create for ourselves. We have arrived at a pivotal point in our journey. We have seen that suffering can be a karmic result, a debt from the past, and even a purifying fire. But these are still explanations, maps of the terrain. We must now turn to the most practical of questions. When this fire arrives, when the painful fruit ripens and the debt collector knocks, what precisely are we to do? How do we navigate the direct experience of misfortune without being consumed by it? Here, the Buddha offers not a complex metaphysical theory, but one of the most profound, practical, and immediately useful teachings in all of contemplative science. It is a teaching that hinges on a crucial distinction, a distinction between the pain that life is bound to give us and the suffering we needlessly create for ourselves. This is the parable of the two arrows. The Buddha once asked his followers, "If a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful?" The monks replied, "Yes, blessed one, it is painful." The Buddha then asked, "And if that person, after being struck by the first arrow, then takes a second arrow and stabs himself in the very same wound, is it not even more painful?" "Yes, blessed one," they replied. "To be struck by two arrows is far more painful than to be struck by one." The Buddha then explained, "In life, we cannot always avoid the first arrow. This arrow is the raw, unavoidable, and often unpleasant reality of our existence. It is the pain of a headache, the sting of a criticism, the grief of losing a loved one, the anxiety of receiving a bad diagnosis, the shock of a sudden accident. This first arrow is the vipaka, the ripened fruit of past karma. It is an intrinsic part of living in this world of cause and effect. No one is immune. Even the most enlightened beings experience the first arrow. They get sick, they grow old, they feel physical pain. This is the unavoidable dimension of our human condition. The second arrow, however, is the arrow of our own making. It is the arrow of our reaction to the first. After the first arrow of a painful event strikes, we almost immediately reach into our mental quiver and shoot a second arrow directly into the same wound. This second arrow has many names. It is the arrow of resentment. This shouldn't be happening to me. It's unfair. It is the arrow of blame. This is all their fault. If only they hadn't done that. It is the arrow of self-pity. Why me? I'm always the one who suffers. It is the arrow of fear. This is a catastrophe. My life is over. What will happen to me now? It is the arrow of shame, of guilt, of anger, of despair. These second arrows are not part of the original event. They are our commentary on the event. They are the story we tell ourselves about the pain. And it is these self-inflicted wounds that transform simple, clean pain into deep, prolonged, and complicated suffering. Let us bring this into our modern lives. Imagine you lose your job. The moment you are given the news, a first arrow strikes. There is a jolt of shock, a knot of fear in your stomach, a wave of sadness. This initial pain is real and unavoidable. It is the natural response to a difficult life event. An enlightened being, experiencing this, would feel this initial pain fully, acknowledge it, and allow it to be, without adding anything to it. But what do most of us do? We go home, and we begin to fire the second arrows. I am a failure. That is a second arrow. My spouse will lose respect for me. That is a second arrow. We are going to lose our house and end up on the street. That is a second arrow of catastrophic thinking. I can't believe my boss did this to me after all my hard work. That is an arrow of resentment. I should have seen this coming. I'm so stupid. That is an arrow of self-blame. The initial pain of the job loss itself might last for a day or two before it begins to naturally subside. But the suffering created by this volley of second arrows can last for months, even years. It can poison our self-esteem, damage our relationships, and paralyze our ability to move forward. The original wound is kept open and infected, not by the initial event, but by our own continuous assault upon ourselves. Herein lies the key to our freedom. We may not have control over the first arrow. The winds of past karma will blow as they will. The conditions of the world will change. People will act in ways that hurt us. Loss and sickness are inescapable features of life. To expect a life free of first arrows is to set ourselves up for constant disappointment. But the second arrow is entirely different. The second arrow is optional. Its bow is in our hands. The choice to fire it or to lay the weapon down is ours and ours alone. The entirety of the Buddhist path, all the practices of meditation, mindfulness, and wisdom, can be seen as the training to stop firing the second arrow. It is the practice of learning to create a space between the initial impact of the first arrow and our habitual, conditioned reaction. This does not mean becoming a robot. It is not about suppressing our emotions or pretending that we don't feel pain. In fact, it is the precise opposite. The reason we fire the second arrow so quickly is that we are terrified of feeling the clean pain of the first. We try to think our way out of it, to blame our way out of it, to create a dramatic story around it. The practice of mindfulness is the practice of being willing, just for a moment, to feel the raw, non-verbal sensation of the first arrow without the story. To simply feel the heat of anger, the hollowness of grief, the vibration of fear, as pure energy in the body, without immediately launching into the narrative of, I am angry because, or this grief is unbearable because. When we can allow the raw energy of the first arrow to be felt, to be held in a spacious, non-judgmental awareness, it does a remarkable thing. It moves through us and passes. We realize that we are the sky, and the emotion is just a weather pattern. By not resisting it, we do not prolong it. This is where we reclaim our power. We cannot control the karma of the past, but we have absolute authority over the karma we create in the present. And the most significant karma we create is in how we choose to respond to the unfolding events of our lives. We cannot stop the rain from falling, but we can decide whether we will stand outside shaking our fist at the clouds or simply open an umbrella. The rain is the first arrow. Shaking our fist at it is the second. Opening an umbrella is the wise response. We can learn to greet the inevitable pains of life with a sense of dignity, courage, and even grace, because we know that we do not have to add to them. The peace that we seek is not found in a world free of first arrows, for such a world does not exist. It is found in the stillness of our own hand, as we consciously choose to lay down the bow. This is a profound and life-altering realization, but it immediately raises a practical question. If our habit of firing the second arrow is so deeply ingrained, so automatic that we don't even notice we're doing it, how do we begin to stop? What is the very first, most fundamental step in learning to lay down our weapons? The answer is the first step in dealing with any reality. We must first be willing to see it and to accept it exactly as it is. This brings us to the crucial distinction between a wise, courageous acceptance and a weak, passive resignation. We have arrived at the heart of the practice. To find peace in the midst of life's storms, we must learn not to fire the second arrow. And the essential first step in laying down this weapon is a profound and courageous act of acceptance. Yet, this very word, acceptance, is perhaps one of the most misunderstood in our modern vocabulary. It is so often confused with its weak and passive cousin, resignation. We hear accept what is, and we imagine being a doormat, giving up, letting the world walk all over us. We picture a state of defeated powerlessness. This confusion is a critical barrier. To reclaim our inner freedom, we must first reclaim the true meaning of acceptance and draw a clear, bright line between it and the despair of resignation. The difference between these two states is the difference between a prison and a gateway. Resignation is the language of defeat. It is the heavy sigh of a spirit that has given up. The mind in a state of resignation says, "This is just my lot in life. It's hopeless. There is nothing I can do." It is a philosophy rooted in the identity of a victim. To be resigned is to see oneself as a powerless object being acted upon by overwhelming external forces, be fate, by other people, by a cruel and unjust system. This state is not one of peaceful surrender. It is emotionally toxic. It is almost always saturated with the poison of the second arrows. It is a stew of bitterness, a deep-seated resentment against the unfairness of it all, and a draining, chronic self-pity that saps all vitality. Resignation is a stagnant, murky pool of suffering. It is like being in a prison cell, believing the door is welded shut, and therefore spending all your days slumped in a dark corner, lamenting the thickness of the walls and the cruelty of the guards. Acceptance, in its true spiritual sense, is the polar opposite. It is not weak. It is an act of immense courage. It is not passive. It is an act of supreme, clear-eyed engagement with reality. Acceptance is simply the willingness to see things exactly as they are in this present moment, without argument, without distortion. It is the courageous decision to drop the exhausting mental war with what is. The key to understanding acceptance is that it is not the same as approval. You do not have to like the reality you are accepting. You do not have to approve of being sick. You do not have to condone the hurtful behavior of another person. You simply have to acknowledge that it is happening. Acceptance says, "This is the situation. This is the first arrow that has struck. I will not pretend it isn't here." It is an act of radical honesty. To the person in the prison cell, acceptance is not giving up. It is the calm, factual assessment of the situation. I am in a room with 4 walls. There is a floor and a ceiling. There is a door. It does not judge the situation. It simply sees it. Let us use a parable to make this distinction visceral. Imagine you are peacefully rowing a boat on a wide river when a sudden, violent current capsizes your vessel and throws you into the fast-moving water. The shock of the cold is the first arrow. Now, you have 2 possible paths. The path of resignation is to thrash about in panic for a moment, and then, feeling the overwhelming power of the current, to give up. The mind begins its litany of second arrows. It's hopeless. The current is too strong. I'm going to drown. It's all the fault of the person who made this faulty boat. Why does this always happen to me? You go limp, and you allow the river to carry you away, a passive victim on a journey to oblivion. The path of acceptance is different. After the initial shock of the cold water, the first thought is not a story, but a simple, clear fact. I am in the water. This is acceptance. It is a direct, non-negotiable acknowledgement of your present reality. You do not have to like being in the water. You certainly do not approve of it. But you do not waste a single drop of precious energy arguing with the fact that you are wet and being carried by a current. This clear-eyed acceptance is the essential prerequisite for any intelligent action. It calms the panic. And from this place of stillness, the next thoughts can arise. Okay, I am in the water. Which way is the shore? Can I use this current to help me? Is there a log or a branch I can grab onto? Acceptance is not about drowning. Acceptance is what creates the mental space for you to remember how to swim. This reveals the most crucial truth. Acceptance is not the end of action, but the necessary foundation for all wise action. Any action born from a place of non-acceptance from denial, rage, or panic will be chaotic, ineffective, and likely to make things worse. If you deny you are sick, you will not seek treatment, and the illness will progress. If you resign yourself to the illness, you will fall into despair and make no effort to support your own healing. But if you accept the reality of the diagnosis, you can then engage with it from a place of clarity and strength. You can ask the right questions, research the best treatments, make supportive lifestyle changes, and actively participate in your own recovery. Acceptance of the first arrow is what allows you to respond skillfully, rather than simply reacting blindly. This transformation from resignation to acceptance is a profound inner shift. The external circumstances might remain the same for a while. You are still in the river, you still have the illness, but your relationship to them changes completely. You stop wasting monumental amounts of psychic energy fighting a war with what is. The past has already happened. The present moment is as it is. Arguing with reality is as futile as punching a stone wall. The only thing that gets hurt is your own hand. When we stop this pointless internal battle, all of that conserved energy becomes available to us. It can be channeled into what we can change, our actions from this moment forward, our attitude, and the future we are actively creating. Resignation is a prison, but it is a prison locked from the inside with the keys of bitterness and self-pity. Acceptance is the courageous act of turning that key and walking out into the clear air of reality. It is the brave decision to show up for your own life exactly as it is, without illusion or complaint. It is the only ground upon which a life of peace and wisdom can be built. And when we are able to stand on this ground, when we can face our own reality with this kind of equanimity, something remarkable begins to happen. Our heart, no longer armored by denial and resentment, begins to soften. In accepting the reality of our own first arrows, we gain an intimate and embodied understanding of the pain that all beings must face. Our personal journey becomes a universal one, and this courageous acceptance of our own suffering becomes the fertile soil in which a true and boundless compassion for others can finally, authentically, begin to grow. When we learn to stand our ground with quiet courage, when we can face the reality of the first arrow without immediately firing the second, a stillness descends. The frantic, exhausting energy of fighting with reality begins to subside. In the spaciousness that this creates, something profound and unexpected can begin to flourish. When we are no longer completely consumed by the drama of our own personal story, we can, for the first time, truly see the stories of others. The wise acceptance of our own suffering becomes the fertile ground in which the flower of compassion can finally grow. This compassion, known in the Buddhist tradition as karuna, is not merely a fleeting emotion. It is a fundamental shift in perspective, a key that can unlock us from the prison of our own pain. Karuna is often translated as compassion, but its meaning is more specific and active than simple pity. Pity often carries a subtle sense of superiority, a looking down from a safe distance upon the misfortune of another. Karuna, however, arises from a place of shared vulnerability. It is the trembling of the heart in the presence of suffering, combined with the sincere and active wish for that suffering to cease. It is the heartfelt prayer, "May you be free from this pain." It is born not from a sense of being separate and better off, but from the deep recognition of a shared condition. It is the heart's response to seeing a fellow traveler stumble on the same difficult road. This is why our own experience of suffering, when met with wisdom, is the greatest possible teacher of compassion. Before we have truly faced our own first arrows, the suffering of others can seem abstract, something we read about or see on a screen. We might feel a detached sympathy, a sad thought for those poor people. But when we ourselves have been pierced by the arrow of loss, when we have intimately known the landscape of grief, illness, or betrayal, we gain an insider's knowledge. We no longer just know about suffering, we know it in our bones, in our nerves, in our heart. This embodied understanding becomes a bridge. We begin to realize that the fundamental vibration of our own pain is identical to the pain of every other being. The labels are different. My suffering is called a financial crisis. Your suffering is called a lonely old age. Their suffering is called a broken heart. But the underlying feeling of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness and pain, is universal. In that moment of recognition, the illusion of separation begins to crumble. The walls we build around our personal pain, the walls of why me and no one understands, dissolve. We see that our suffering is not a unique punishment that isolates us from the world. Instead, it is our very ticket of admission into the shared human family. It is the common ground upon which we can meet every other being with a sense of profound and authentic empathy. The lonely widower, the frightened child, the angry and frustrated person lashing out at the world, we see that they too have been struck by first arrows. We see that their difficult behaviors are often just clumsy, misguided attempts to deal with the pain of their own second arrows. Our personal pain ceases to be a wall and becomes a window, a gateway to connection. This understanding is not meant to remain a passive insight. It is a call to an active practice, a cultivation of the heart. The practice of developing compassion begins, necessarily, with ourselves. We cannot pour from an empty vessel. For many of us, this is the hardest step. We are often our own harshest critics. But we must learn to turn the gentle wish of karuna inward. May I be free from this suffering. May I learn to hold this pain with kindness. We learn to soothe our own wounds with the balm of self-compassion, rather than rubbing salt in them with self-blame. Once we have established this foundation of kindness toward ourselves, we can begin to extend it outward. We can bring to mind a person we love who is suffering, and in our heart, we can genuinely radiate the wish. May you find peace. May you be free from this difficulty. We can then extend this wish to neutral people, and finally, in the most transformative step of the practice, we can extend it to those who have hurt us. This is a radical act of spiritual maturity. It is the recognition that the person who harmed us was themselves acting from a place of their own suffering, their own delusion, their own unwholesome karmic seeds. Their harmful actions were the bitter fruit of their own pain. To wish for them to be free from the suffering that causes their harmful behavior is not to condone their actions. It is to liberate ourselves from the prison of our own hatred and resentment. It is the ultimate refusal to fire the second arrow. Each thought of compassion we generate is not just a fleeting nice idea. It is a powerful, wholesome karmic seed planted in our own storehouse consciousness, a cause that will ripen into our own future peace. In the Mahayana tradition, this boundless compassion is embodied in the archetypal figure of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, whose name means the one who perceives the cries of the world. This being is not a god to be worshipped, but a representation of the compassionate potential within every heart. It is said that Avalokiteshvara vowed not to enter final nirvana until all beings were free from suffering. But as he looked out upon the endless ocean of worldly pain, his heart broke with such overwhelming empathy that his head shattered into 1,000 pieces. The Buddhas, seeing his great compassion, reassembled him with 1,000 heads to better perceive all suffering, and 1,000 arms to better reach out and help. This myth is a beautiful poem about the nature of karuna. It is the courage to keep our hearts open to the vastness of suffering, not as a source of despair, but as a source of motivation. It is the understanding that our own small heartbreak is a tributary to the great river of all heartbreak, and our own healing contributes to the healing of the whole. This is the ultimate medicine. When we are trapped in the vortex of our own pain, our world shrinks to the size of our wound. It is a lonely, claustrophobic, and self-centered state. But the very moment we sincerely wish for another being to be free from their suffering, our world expands. We step outside the narrow confines of me, my, and mine. The bitterness of why me begins to dissolve in the vast, shared ocean of us. Compassion is the cooling balm that soothes the inflammation caused by the second arrows. It does not magically erase the pain of the first arrow, but it changes our relationship to it completely, transforming it from a source of isolated misery into a source of profound and boundless connection. To hold our suffering with this compassionate acceptance is one great pillar of wisdom. It gives us the strength to endure. But there is another pillar, just as crucial, that gives us the wisdom to see through the suffering itself. If compassion helps us to hold our pain, the wisdom of impermanence helps us to let it go. It is the realization that the storm, no matter how fierce, is, by its very nature, just passing through. We have learned to meet the first arrow of our suffering with a courageous acceptance, creating a stillness within. Into this stillness, we have invited compassion, or karuna, which transforms our personal pain into a bridge of connection with all living beings. This gives us the strength to hold our suffering with kindness. Now, we turn to another pillar of profound wisdom, one that does not just help us to hold our suffering but allows us to begin to let it go. This is the wisdom of anicca, the universal truth of impermanence. To understand impermanence is to understand that in a universe defined by constant flow, nothing, not even our deepest pain, can last forever. This is not a bleak thought, but the most liberating and hopeful truth we can embrace. The law of impermanence is not a speculative belief. It is a fundamental characteristic of reality, observable at every level of existence. The cells in our bodies are constantly dying and being replaced. The seasons turn in a relentless cycle of birth, growth, decay, and rebirth. Mountains rise up over millions of years, only to be worn down into sand. Great empires that seem invincible crumble into dust and are forgotten. Stars are born in fiery nebulae and collapse into darkness. From the infinitesimally small to the cosmically vast, everything is in a state of flux. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent. The universe is not a collection of solid things, but a dynamic symphony of processes. A primary source of our suffering is our refusal to accept this fundamental truth. We desperately try to build a permanent home on shifting ground, to grasp onto a solid rock in the middle of a flowing river. We crave permanence in a universe whose very nature is change. There is a timeless story that illustrates this wisdom with beautiful simplicity. A great king, who possessed immense power and wealth, found himself tossed between the exhilarating highs of victory and the crushing lows of defeat. His emotional life was a battlefield. He summoned his wisest counselors and tasked them with a challenge. "Create for me a ring," he commanded, "and on it inscribe a short message. This message must be such that when I am at the absolute peak of my happiness and triumph, it will bring me back to balance. And when I am in the depths of despair and failure, it will give me solace." The wise men conferred for a long time and finally returned with a simple gold band. The king looked inside, and there he saw the engraved words, "This too shall pass." In these 4 simple words lies a complete path of wisdom. The king understood immediately. When celebrating a great victory, surrounded by adulation, a glance at the ring would remind him, "This glory is fleeting. Do not become arrogant. Do not cling to it." It would allow him to enjoy his success with humility and grace. And when facing a terrible defeat, betrayed by his allies and mourning his losses, another glance would bring a wave of comfort. This despair, this grief, this failure is not a permanent state. This too shall pass. It would give him the strength to endure, to not be defined by his sorrow. The message was a constant, silent teacher, always pointing him back to the truth of impermanence. This teaching is a double-edged sword of wisdom, cutting through both our attachments and our aversions. When we are experiencing moments of great happiness, the joy of a new relationship, the beauty of a perfect sunset, the satisfaction of achieving a goal, the thought of impermanence is not there to spoil the moment. On the contrary, it enhances it. Knowing that this beautiful experience is transient, that it cannot be bottled up and saved for later, frees us to be fully present for it. We can appreciate the fragrance of the rose without the anxious need to prevent it from eventually wilting. We can savor the sweetness of the moment without the bitterness of clinging. But it is in times of suffering that the gift of anicca reveals its most profound healing power. When we are in the grip of intense physical or emotional pain, what often makes it feel truly unbearable is the hidden belief that it will last forever. A terrifying thought arises, "I cannot live like this for the rest of my life." This thought is the essence of hopelessness. It takes a difficult but temporary state and projects it into an infinite, torturous future. This is the thought that leads to true despair. The wisdom of impermanence is the direct antidote. It is the gentle but persistent voice of reality that whispers, "Listen, nothing is permanent. This intense pain you feel right now is a process. It is a set of conditions that have arisen, and because they have arisen, they will also, inevitably, pass away. The sharpest pangs of grief will soften into a gentle memory. The raging fire of anger will burn itself out and become cool ash. The dark, heavy storm of depression will eventually exhaust its reign and give way to a clearing sky." This is not wishful thinking. It is an appeal to the most fundamental law of existence. Knowing this doesn't magically erase the pain of the moment, but it gives us the strength to endure it, because we know it is not a life sentence. It is just a season, and all seasons change. A classic meditation image for this practice is to see your mind as a vast open sky. Your core awareness is like the sky itself, spacious, clear, and fundamentally untroubled. Your thoughts, emotions, and sensations are like the weather. Sometimes the sky of your mind is filled with beautiful, fluffy white clouds of happiness and peace. At other times, dark, heavy storm clouds of sadness, fear, or physical pain roll in. The storm can be so intense, so loud and dramatic, that we forget we are the sky. We believe we are the storm. We identify completely with the temporary weather pattern. The practice of mindfulness, informed by the wisdom of impermanence, is to remember our true nature as the sky. We learn to watch the storm cloud of suffering as it enters our awareness. We can acknowledge its presence, its darkness, its intensity, without believing it is our identity. We can know, with unshakable confidence, that because it is a cloud, its very nature is to shift, to change, and to eventually drift on, revealing the vast, peaceful, blue sky that was there all along. This is the gift of anicca. It is not a morbid philosophy of decay, but a dynamic and liberating truth. It frees us from the desperate grasping for pleasure and from the terrified aversion to pain. It teaches us to sail the changing seas of life with more skill, more resilience, and more grace. By understanding that our suffering is a temporary weather pattern, not the permanent climate of our being, we find the hope and the courage to navigate even the most difficult storms. And this leads us to an even more proactive stance. If we can accept our suffering with compassion and watch it with the wisdom of impermanence, can we take it one step further? Can we actively use this unwelcome energy as a fuel for our own growth? Can this difficult, painful experience be transformed from a mere obstacle to be endured into a powerful tool for our own awakening? We have learned to approach the inevitable pains of life with the quiet strength of acceptance and the open heart of compassion. We have taken comfort in the great law of impermanence, understanding that even the darkest storm cloud must eventually pass. These practices provide us with the tools to endure suffering with a newfound grace and resilience. They help us to bear the unbearable, but the path of wisdom invites us to take one further, revolutionary step. It asks, is it enough to simply endure? Or can we learn to use the very source of our affliction as the fuel for our liberation? This is the alchemical heart of the Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhist paths, the courageous art of not just enduring suffering, but of actively transforming it into the very substance of our awakening. The most profound symbol of this path is the lotus flower. The lotus is an emblem of perfect purity, enlightenment, and spiritual beauty. Its petals are immaculate, its form is elegant, its fragrance is sublime. Yet, where does this perfect flower grow? It does not spring from the pristine soil of a mountaintop, nor from the carefully manicured earth of a royal garden. The lotus rises from the thickest, darkest, foulest smelling mud at the bottom of a stagnant pond. It is born from the muck, and this is its teaching. The lotus does not just tolerate the mud. It does not simply endure its murky surroundings. It actively draws its nourishment from the very mud that would seem to be an obstacle to its beauty. The darkness is the source of its light. In the same way, the spiritual path does not demand that we first eliminate all the mud of our lives, greed, our anger, our fear, our confusion, our painful karmic results. Instead, it teaches that this very mud can become the rich, fertile compost for the growth of our own inner lotus. This is a radical shift from a defensive posture to a creative one. We move from asking, "How can I protect myself from this pain?" to asking, "How can I use this pain? What is this difficulty here to teach me? How can this unwelcome event become an instrument for my awakening?" We cease to be victims of our lives and begin to become spiritual alchemists, learning the secret of transmuting the base metal of our suffering into the pure gold of wisdom. Every difficulty that life presents us with can be seen as a fierce but compassionate teacher, offering a specific and powerful lesson if we are willing to learn. When we experience a profound loss, it is a direct, visceral teaching on the truth of anicca, impermanence. It shatters our childish illusion that things will last forever and forces us to seek a source of peace that is not dependent on the fragile, ever-changing conditions of the external world. When we find ourselves in conflict with another person, it becomes a perfect laboratory for practice. The conflict mercilessly illuminates our own pride, our own attachment to being right, our own deeply buried anger. It offers us a golden opportunity to practice khanti, true patience, and to look deeply into the other person, to see that their hurtful actions are driven by their own suffering, thus awakening a genuine karuna, or compassion. When we are faced with a serious illness, it acts as a powerful teacher of embodiment. It forcibly yanks our awareness out of the world of abstract thoughts, plans, and worries, and plunges us into the direct, undeniable reality of our physical existence. It can teach us to appreciate the simple, profound miracle of a single healthy breath, a gift we had previously taken for granted every moment of every day. In this way, sickness becomes a stark and potent reminder of the preciousness and fragility of this human life. When we experience failure, it serves as the perfect antidote to the poison of arrogance and pride. It humbles us, forcing us to reevaluate what we truly value and to detach our sense of self-worth from the fickle metrics of worldly success. Each hardship, seen through this lens, is no longer a random punishment, but a tailor-made spiritual curriculum designed for our own specific needs. There is an elegant parable that captures this transformative process perfectly. Imagine an oyster living a quiet life at the bottom of the ocean. One day, its peace is disturbed. A sharp, irritating grain of sand becomes lodged within its soft inner flesh. This is the first arrow. It is a source of constant friction, an unwelcome intrusion, a persistent pain. The oyster could be consumed by this irritation, its life defined by this internal wound. But instead, it begins a slow, patient, and miraculous process. It starts to secrete a precious, luminous substance called nacre. It gently, carefully coats the sharp, irritating grain of sand with this substance, layer after shimmering layer. Over a great expanse of time, through this patient and creative response to its own source of pain, the oyster transforms the irritant into an object of exquisite beauty and value. It creates a perfect pearl. We are all this oyster. The inevitable hardships of our lives, the illnesses, the losses, the betrayals, the failures are the sharp grains of sand, our initial reactive suffering, the anger, the fear, the self-piteous, the pain of the irritation. But our spiritual practice, our conscious cultivation of wisdom and compassion, is the secretion of the nacre. We can learn to coat the sharp edges of our karmic results with the shimmering layers of acceptance. We can smooth them with the steady application of patience. We can surround them with the luminous glow of a compassionate heart. And in doing so, we perform the ultimate alchemy. We take the very thing that was meant to cause us suffering, and we transform it into the pearl of our own awakening. This is the sacred art of turning poison into medicine. This is not a simple mind trick. It is a profound practice that requires all the tools we have gathered on our journey: the stillness of acceptance, the warmth of compassion, and the clear light of impermanence. It is the ultimate expression of our own agency, the declaration that no matter what the world brings to us, we have the power to determine what we will make of it. We are no longer passive recipients of our karmic fate. We become active creators, alchemists of the heart. But to truly master this art, to transmute the deepest poisons of existence, we must ask one final, penetrating question. We have learned to transform our experience of suffering, but who, precisely, is the one who is suffering? To find the ultimate freedom, we must be willing to look directly at the very nature of the self who feels the pain. This inquiry will lead us to the most subtle, challenging, and liberating wisdom of all. We have journeyed far, learning to reframe our suffering, to accept it with courage, to hold it with compassion, to see its impermanent nature, and even to transform its energy into the fuel for our awakening. We have learned to become spiritual alchemists. But in any alchemical process, one must have a deep understanding of the core elements being transformed. We have examined the nature of suffering, but we must now turn the full power of our inquiry upon the most intimate, most fundamental, and most unquestioned element of our experience, the self. Who is this I that suffers? Who is this me that is the central character in the story of our life? All our pain, all our fear, all our striving seems to revolve around this single point of reference. To find the ultimate freedom, we must be willing to investigate the nature of the investigator itself. This leads us to the most subtle, the most challenging, and ultimately the most liberating teaching of the Buddha, the wisdom of anatta, or no, self. From the moment we become self-aware, we operate under a default assumption. We feel, with unshakable certainty, that there is a solid, continuous, and independent me residing somewhere inside this body, behind these eyes. This I is the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our emotions, the owner of our experiences. It is the protagonist who was born, who has lived through our past, who is experiencing this present moment, and who will journey into the future. When we face misfortune, it is this I that feels attacked. When we are praised, it is this I that feels gratified. Our entire life is a drama constructed around protecting this self, defending its territory, and satisfying its desires. This sense of being a separate, enduring self feels so obviously true that we never think to question it. It is the very ground we stand on. And yet, the Buddha declared that this very ground is an illusion, and our attachment to this illusory self is the deepest root of all our suffering. Instead of accepting the self as a given, the Buddha approached the question like a scientist. He deconstructed the human experience into its fundamental components, seeking to find this essential I. This investigation yielded a famous analysis known as the 5 aggregates, or panchakandathe, 5 heaps or bundles that constitute what we call a person. The first is form, or rupa. This is our physical body or flesh, blood, bones, and breath. Is this our self? A moment's reflection shows it cannot be. Our body is constantly changing, aging, getting sick. We cannot command it to not grow old or to not feel pain. It is an impersonal process, not a permanent self. The second is feeling, or vedana. These are the raw sensations that arise whenever our senses make contact with the world, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Are these feelings our self? Clearly not. They are as fleeting as the weather, arising and vanishing from one moment to the next. The third aggregate is perception, or sanya. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. That is a tree. This is a pleasant sound. That was an insult. Are our perceptions, our self, number? They are conditioned by our memory, culture, and mood, and they are often mistaken. The fourth is mental formations, or sankara. This is a broad category that includes all our volitional activities. Our thoughts, habits, opinions, prejudices, desires, and most importantly, our intentions, our cetana. This is the active, creative part of the mind. But are these thoughts and impulses our true self? Number. Thoughts arise and pass away, often unbidden. We cannot simply stop thinking by command. These formations are conditioned processes, not a central commander. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness, or vijnana. This is the basic quality of awareness, the light that allows the other 4 aggregates to be known. But is this awareness itself a permanent self? The Buddha said no. Consciousness is also a conditioned process. It arises in dependence upon an object. Seeing consciousness arises with a sight. Hearing consciousness arises with a sound. It is not a standalone monolithic I that exists independently. The radical conclusion of this analysis is that a person is nothing more than the temporary coming together of these 5 flowing interdependent processes. There is no 6th thing, no static, unchanging self or soul hiding behind them, acting as their owner or CEO. The self we feel so strongly is a mental construct, a convenient label applied to this dynamic process. Much like the word river is a label applied to the flowing of water. A modern analogy might be to think of a person as a corporation, me, incorporated. The body is the physical office building. Feelings are the incoming market data. Perceptions are the PR department, labeling everything. Mental formations are the various departments, creating strategies and products. Consciousness is the electricity powering the whole operation. We assume there must be a CEO in a penthouse office, a single entity who is in charge of it all. The practice of insight meditation is like a deep forensic audit of this corporation. We go looking for the CEO, we search the building, but we only find changing matter. We analyze the data streams, but they are just fleeting sensations. We look through all the departments, but find only shifting thoughts and intentions. After a thorough and exhaustive search, we come to a startling conclusion. There is no CEO. The entity we call me, Inc., is a complex, self-organizing system that runs on its own. The I we thought was in charge is just a job title, a concept, not a real person in a chair. A classic Zen story illustrates this insight perfectly. A monk named Huike, who was in deep mental anguish, came before the great master Bodhidharma and pleaded, "My mind is filled with anxiety. Please, master, pacify my mind." Bodhidharma looked at him and said simply, "Bring me your mind, and I will pacify it for you." Huike went away and searched desperately within himself. He tried to locate this mind that was anxious. He tried to grasp it, to hold it, to find it as a solid thing he could present to the master. After a long search, he returned, humbled and exhausted. "Master," he said, "I have searched for my mind, but I cannot find it." Bodhidharma smiled gently and replied, "There, I have pacified it for you." Huike's suffering was rooted in the belief that he had a mind that was a solid thing which could be afflicted. When he realized he couldn't grasp it, that it was not an entity, the anxiety had no place to land. The problem dissolved when the sufferer could not be found. This is the ultimate alchemy. All of our suffering needs a self to cling to. It needs a target. When a painful karmic fruit ripens, our suffering is not just the raw pain. It is the thought, "I am in pain. My life is being ruined. This is happening to me." When this deeply ingrained belief in a solid, separate I begins to soften, the entire experience of suffering is transformed. The pain may still be present, but it becomes an ownerless pain. It is no longer my pain. It is simply pain. An impersonal sensation arising and passing in a vast field of awareness. It is the difference between your own house being on fire, which is a personal catastrophe, and seeing a distant wildfire on a far-off mountain. The fire is real, but it is not a personal attack. It loses its sting. The wisdom of no self is not a nihilistic philosophy that claims we do not exist. It is a liberating truth that frees us from a case of mistaken identity. We are not a static noun, but a dynamic verb. We are not a thing, but a process. We are not a separate self, but an ever-changing manifestation of the entire universe. When there is no solid ego to defend, no fragile self to protect, no central me for fear and sorrow to attach to, we become fearless. And this fearlessness does not lead to apathy. On the contrary, when we are finally unburdened from the heavy, exhausting project of maintaining and defending the I, we are free to engage with the world with an unprecedented spontaneity, joy, and compassion. We can finally begin to plant a new garden, not for the sake of some future reward for me, but for the simple, selfless, and joyful act of cultivation itself. We have journeyed to the very core of our being, investigating the intricate laws of karma and questioning the very nature of the self that experiences them. This deep dive into the past and the subtle workings of the mind could leave one feeling small and disoriented, lost in a cosmic web of causes and effects, stretching back through unimaginable time. It might feel as though we are helplessly bound by the chains of our own history. But it is precisely from this point of profound understanding that the path forward becomes clear. All of the wisdom we have gathered on cause and effect, on intention, on impermanence and no selfish, not meant to be a weight that crushes us, but a light that illuminates the single point in all of existence where our true power lies, the present moment. The past is for understanding, the present is for creating. We are, at all times, living in two simultaneous realities. The first is the reality of the ripening fruit, the vipaka. Everything we are experiencing right now, our state of health, our emotional weather, our external circumstances, the harvest of seeds that were planted in the past. This reality is, in large part, unchangeable. The harvest has arrived, the debt has come due, the storm has made landfall. To struggle against this, to argue with it, is a futile and exhausting war with what has already been determined by past causes. This is the reality we must meet with acceptance, compassion, and the wisdom of impermanence. But at the very same time, a second reality is unfolding. With every single thought that flickers through our mind, with every word we choose to speak, with every action we undertake, we are actively sowing new seeds. This is the reality of present moment karma, of active intention, of cetana. This is the sowing of the next harvest, the one that will define our future. The fundamental mistake that keeps us trapped in cycles of suffering is that we invest all of our energy and attention in the first reality, while remaining completely unconscious of the second. We spend our days complaining about the weeds in our garden, while continuing to scatter handfuls of new weed seeds all around us. We are obsessed with the ripened fruit of the past, and oblivious to the creative power of the present. The path to freedom involves a radical shift in our focus. It is a conscious turning from the obsessive question, "Why is this happening to me?" to the liberating question, "How shall I respond?" The question why sends our minds spiraling into the past, into a labyrinth of speculation from which it may never emerge. It leads to self-pity, resentment, and a feeling of helpless victimhood. But the question how brings our full attention, our full power, into the here and now. It is the only question that matters, for the present is the only time we can ever act. Let us return to the parable of the gardener, whose beautiful sanctuary was destroyed by a storm. This storm is the ripening of past karma, an unavoidable first arrow. A foolish gardener, standing amidst the wreckage, would be consumed by the why. Why my garden? I worked so hard. This is unjust. The heavens are cruel. He would spend his days mourning the fallen trees, weeping over the crushed flowers. His focus would be entirely on the harvest of destruction, and so, the garden would remain a ruin, a monument to his grief. But a wise gardener, after taking a moment to acknowledge the pain of the loss, to accept the reality of the destruction, would do something different. He knows that cursing the storm of yesterday will not make a single new leaf grow today. His energy does not flow into resentment of the past, but into the potential of the present. He turns his attention to the second reality, the act of sowing. He begins the patient work. He clears away the broken branches. He pulls up the dead plants. He tills the soil, enriching it with fresh compost. He carefully searches for any surviving seeds and bulbs. And then, with deliberate intention, he begins to plant a new garden. He knows, with absolute certainty, that the beauty of his future garden depends not on the memory of the storm, but entirely on the quality of the seeds he plants and the care he gives them in this present moment. We are all this gardener. Life will bring its storms. Our past karma will ripen. Our old gardens will, at times, be laid to waste. Our choice is whether we will sit and weep amidst the ruins, or if we will pick up our tools and begin the sacred work of planting anew. The primary tool for this new cultivation is mindfulness, or sati. Mindfulness is the capacity to be aware of what we are doing while we are doing it, to be aware of what we are thinking while we are thinking it. Without mindfulness, we are unconscious gardeners. We are driven by the old, ingrained habits of our mind, the deep furrows of our past karma. We react with anger, we grasp with greed, we retreat in fear, scattering these poisonous seeds without even realizing it. But with mindfulness, we can become conscious creators. We can develop the ability to see a thought of anger arise and to make a choice not to water it with our attention or express it with a harsh word. We can notice a grasping impulse and choose instead to cultivate a sense of contentment or generosity. Mindfulness is what allows us to step into the space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies our power to choose a different path, to plant a different kind of seed. The Buddha summarized this perfectly when he taught that we are both the heirs and the creators of our karma. We are the heirs of our past. We cannot disown our inheritance. The fruits of our past actions, both pleasant and painful, will come to us, and we must learn to receive them with wisdom and grace. But we are also, in this very moment, the creators of our future. We are the owners of our present actions. The intentions we form right now are the causes that will shape the world we will inherit tomorrow. This is the ultimate synthesis of acceptance and empowerment. We accept what we cannot change the past, and we take radical responsibility for what we can change the present. This is not a burden. It is the most liberating truth imaginable. It means you are not defined by your past. You are not a prisoner of your old karma. You are the architect of your own freedom. The entire trajectory of your life, stretching out into the future, can be altered by the choices you make in this very moment. By choosing a thought of kindness over one of anger, by choosing a word of healing over one of harm, by choosing an act of generosity over one of selfishness, you are doing more than just being a good person. You are actively, consciously, and powerfully planting the seeds of your own future happiness and the happiness of the entire world. And this sacred act of planting a new garden, of accepting the reality of what is, while skillfully creating what can be, is beautifully illustrated in one of the most beloved stories in the Buddhist tradition. The path we have been exploring, from the depths of karmic law to the liberating wisdom of no self, can seem vast and philosophical. To bring it all together, to see how these principles manifest in a single human life, we turn now to one of the most poignant and beloved stories from the Buddhist tradition. It is the story of a woman named Kisagotami, and it illustrates, with heartbreaking beauty, how the journey from the most intense personal suffering to a state of profound peace is not paved with intellectual answers, but with lived, experiential truth. It is a story that embodies the very essence of planting a new garden in the face of utter devastation. Kisagotami was a young woman whose life had been marked by hardship, but she had found her one singular source of joy in the birth of her only son. The child became the absolute center of her world, the vessel for all her love, all her hopes, and her entire sense of identity. Every waking moment was dedicated to him. Then, one day, the unthinkable happened. The child, still just a toddler learning to walk, fell ill and died. For Kisagotami, this was not just a loss, it was the collapse of her entire universe. Her mind, unable to accept the devastating reality of this first arrow, shattered. She entered a state of frantic denial, believing her son was merely gravely ill. Clutching the small, cold body to her chest, she began to wander through her village like a ghost, going from door to door, desperately begging for medicine that could cure her sick child. The villagers, seeing her madness and her grief, could only offer her their pity. She was a woman drowning in sorrow, stabbing herself again and again with the second arrow of a desperate, unwinnable war against reality. Finally, a wise elder, seeing that she could not be reached by reason, took pity on her and suggested a different course. "I do not have the medicine you seek," he said, "but I know a great physician who does. Go to the enlightened one, the Buddha. He will have a cure for you." Clinging to this new sliver of hope, Kisagotami ran to the place where the Buddha was teaching. She burst before him, a frantic, weeping figure, and laid her son at his feet. "Master, they say you are a great physician. Please, give me the medicine that will heal my boy." The Buddha looked upon her, not with condescension for her delusion, but with an ocean of boundless compassion. He saw the depth of her attachment and her pain. He knew that a sermon on the nature of impermanence, or the law of karma, would be meaningless to her. Her heart was a locked room, and she had to be given the key to open it herself. So, he met her on her own terms. "Yes," he said gently, "I can make the medicine you seek, but to prepare it, I require a very specific ingredient." Kisagotami's heart leaped with joy. "What is it, Master? I will get it for you, whatever it is." The Buddha replied, "I need only a single small handful of mustard seeds." Relieved, she cried, "I can get that from any house in the village." "Yes," the Buddha said, adding the crucial condition, "but the mustard seeds must come from a house where no one has ever died. They must be taken from a family that has never known loss." Certain that she could easily fulfill this simple task, Kisagotami thanked him profusely and hurried back towards the village. She arrived at the first house, her heart pounding with anxious hope. "Can you spare me a handful of mustard seeds?" she asked. The Blessed One needs them to make a medicine for my son." The family, happy to help, immediately went to get them. As they handed them to her, Kisagutami remembered the Buddha's condition. "Thank you," she said, "but before I take these, can you tell me, has anyone in this house ever died?" The smiles vanished from the family's faces. "Dear sister," the woman of the house said softly, "you touch upon our deepest sorrow. The living in this house are few, but the dead are many. We lost our beloved father just last year." With a heavy heart, Kisagutami returned the seeds and went to the next house. The story was the same. A wealthy merchant offered her a whole sack of mustard seeds, but admitted he had lost his wife. A poor farmer had seeds, but had lost his brother. She went from house to house, from the grandest mansion to the humblest hut, and the answer was always the same. We lost our mother, our child, our grandparents. Every door she opened, every person she spoke to, held a story of loss. The frantic energy of her personal quest began to slow. Her focus shifted. She was no longer just a mother seeking a cure for her private agony. She was becoming a witness to the universal shared condition of human existence. The sharp, isolating point of her own grief began to soften and dissolve into the vast, communal ocean of sorrow. As evening fell, Kisagutami sat on the outskirts of the village, utterly exhausted. She had failed to find a single house untouched by death. She watched as the lamps in the village were lit, one by one, their small flames flickering in the twilight. And as the night deepened, she watched as they were extinguished, one by one, leaving only darkness. In that simple, profound image, her own lived experience crystallized into a moment of pure insight. "Such is the life of all mortals," she whispered to herself. "They flicker up for a moment, and then they are extinguished." She finally, truly, understood. Death was not a unique tragedy that had cruelly singled her out. It was a universal law, as natural as the setting of the sun. It was her attachment, her mistaken belief that her son could be exempt from this law, that had caused her so much suffering. She gently took the body of her child, which she could now see was just a temporary vessel of form, and carried it to the charnel ground for its final rest. She had found the medicine the Buddha had sent her for not a mustard seed, but the wisdom of acceptance. She returned to the Buddha, no longer the frantic, grieving mother, but a woman who had been transformed, a woman whose heart had been broken open into a state of profound peace. She had traveled the entire path in a single day. She began with the raw pain of the first arrow, multiplied it into madness with the second arrow of denial, and then, through a skillful practice given by a compassionate teacher, she investigated reality for herself. This investigation led her to an unshakable acceptance, which in turn blossomed into a universal compassion. Kisagutami's story is our story. We all begin by believing our pain is a special injustice. The path to freedom is the journey of discovering that our first arrows are the common inheritance of all beings, and that in this shared vulnerability lies our deepest connection and our ultimate peace. We began this long and winding journey with a single, painful question, a question that echoes from the heart of our shared humanity. Why do bad things happen to good people? This question is born from a deep and noble desire for justice, for a world that makes sense, a reality where virtue is rewarded and malice is answered for. In seeking an answer, we have traveled through the intricate laws of karma, explored the power of intention, and journeyed into the vast storehouse of the mind. We have learned to see our lives not as a single, isolated chapter, but as part of a grand and epic novel written across the pages of countless lifetimes. We have learned to find compassion in our pain and hope in the universal truth of impermanence. We have even discovered the alchemical secret of transforming the poison of our suffering into the medicine of our awakening. All of this has been in service of resolving that initial, painful question of fairness. And now, we arrive at the final, most profound turn in the path. We must realize that the ultimate goal of all this wisdom was never to find a satisfactory answer to our question, but to help us transcend the question itself. Our search for fairness is a search for order and justice within the system of cyclical existence, the beginningless round of birth, death, and rebirth that is called samsara. But the Buddha's ultimate teaching points to a truth that is far more radical and liberating. He taught that the entire system of samsara is like a beautiful, magnificent house that is, and always has been, on fire. We, the inhabitants, are so deeply engrossed in our activities inside the house, arguing over who gets the best room, polishing the furniture, decorating the walls, demanding that the rules of the house be fair, that we fail to notice the smoke filling the hallways and the flames licking at the foundations. The house is on fire with the unavoidable realities of old age, sickness, and death. It is on fire with the flames of greed, hatred, and confusion that fuel the entire cycle. Our original question, why do good things happen to good people, is a question about the furniture arrangement in this burning house. Why did their chair catch on fire before mine? It isn't fair. From the perspective of one who is asleep to the danger, this is the most important question in the world. But the Buddha's role is that of a wise and compassionate being who has awakened to the reality of the fire. His purpose is not to help us rearrange the chairs or to explain the intricate physics of how the fire spreads. His urgent and singular message is this: the house is on fire. There is an exit. The path to safety is this way. Follow me. The entire point of understanding the law of karma is not to become a master accountant of our deeds, hoping to secure a more comfortable room in a slightly less fiery corner of the house. The point is to understand the very nature of the fire and the smoke, so that we develop a profound and urgent motivation to get out of the house entirely. The exit from this burning house, the goal of the Buddhist path, is called nirvana. The word itself offers a clue to its meaning. It literally means to extinguish, or to blow out. What is it that is extinguished? It is the three fires that fuel the entire cycle of suffering: the fire of greed, the fire of hatred, and the fire of delusion. When these fires are completely quenched in the heart, the creation of new karma ceases, the sowing of new seeds stops. And when no new causes for suffering are created, the effect of suffering can no longer arise. Nirvana is not a heavenly paradise that we go to after we die. It is a state of being that is realized, a state of unshakable peace, profound freedom, and boundless compassion that is accessible to us when the fires of affliction are put out. It is a state that lies beyond all dualities. It is not happiness, because worldly happiness is always defined by its opposite, sadness, and is dependent on fleeting conditions. Nirvana is a peace that is unconditioned. It is not good, because good is always defined in relation to bad. Nirvana is a state that has transcended the very karmic mechanism that produces good and bad results. It is the end of the game. It is freedom from the wheel of cause and effect itself. To illustrate this, the Buddha offered another simple, powerful parable, the parable of the raft. A person stands on the bank of a wide, terrifying river filled with dangerous currents and ravenous monsters. This near shore is the realm of samsara, the world of suffering. The far shore, dimly visible, is the shore of safety, peace, and liberation, nirvana. There is no bridge to be found. So, being resourceful, the person gathers logs, branches, and vinesths represent the teachings of the Dharma, the concepts of karma, impermanence, and so on. With great effort, they lash these materials together, building a sturdy raft. This represents their spiritual practice. They climb onto the raft and, with skillful and persistent paddling, they navigate the treacherous waters, finally arriving, exhausted but safe, on the far shore. Now, the Buddha asks, what should this wise person do with the raft? Should they, out of a deep sense of gratitude and attachment, hoist the heavy raft onto their shoulders and carry it with them as they continue their journey on dry land? The answer is obvious. Of course not. That would be a foolish and unnecessary burden. A wise person would moor the raft at the river's edge, perhaps leaving it for other travelers to use, and then walk on, light and unencumbered. The teachings themselves, all the concepts we have explored in this long journey, are the raft. They are indispensable tools, absolutely essential for crossing the dangerous river of our confusion. But they are not the destination. The ultimate goal is to arrive at the shore of liberation, a state of such freedom that we no longer need to carry the raft of concepts with us. The practical blueprint for building this raft is the Noble Eightfold Path, the holistic system of training the mind, heart, and body through the cultivation of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. It is the how-to manual for escaping the burning house. And so, our journey comes full circle, but arrives at a place we could not have imagined at the start. We began with a cry for justice within the world. We conclude with an invitation to a peace that lies beyond the world's dualities. The purpose of understanding our karmic predicament is not to become a better prisoner, but to find the key to our own cell. The laws of karma are the description of the prison walls, and the Dharma is the map that shows the way out. The ultimate answer to the question of why good people suffer is that, from the ultimate perspective, the entire game of good and bad, suffering and happiness, as defined by the world, is a game that cannot be won. The only true victory lies in waking up from the game itself and walking freely, in peace, toward the far shore. We began this journey together in a place of pain, confusion, and perceived injustice, asking a question that has haunted humanity for millennia. Why do bad things happen to good people? We stood in the ruins of a metaphorical garden, wondering why the storms of life seem to strike so unfairly. From that starting point, we have traveled an immense distance. We journeyed beyond the simple, misunderstood notion of karma as fate, and rediscovered it as a natural law of cause and effect, powered by the force of our own intentions. We peered into the vast storehouse of the mind and expanded our vision of time to understand how the seeds of a distant past can ripen in our present. We learned to distinguish between the unavoidable first arrow of pain and the optional second arrow of our own making. We found that in accepting our reality, we can open our hearts to compassion, and in understanding impermanence, we can find a deep and abiding hope. We even learned that the very poison of our suffering can be transformed into the medicine of our awakening, and that the solid self we work so hard to protect is more like a flowing river than a fixed stone. We began by demanding an explanation from the universe, and we have arrived at the realization that the only true answer lies in the transformation of ourselves. The ultimate message of this ancient wisdom is not that if you are a good person, nothing bad will ever happen to you. The ultimate message is that peace is not contingent on what happens to you. True and lasting peace, the peace that surpasses all understanding, is not the absence of storms in your life, but the stillness of your mind in the center of the storm. The goal is not to build a life that is immune to the first arrows of loss, sickness, and old age, for such a life is an impossibility. The goal is to cultivate a heart so resilient, so compassionate, and so wise that it no longer has the need to fire the second arrow of resentment, fear, or despair. And so we are left, not with a simple answer, but with a profound sense of empowerment. You are not a passive victim of a chaotic universe. You are not a helpless prisoner of your past deeds. You are the gardener of your own consciousness. The soil you stand on today has been conditioned by your past, but in your hands, in this very moment, you hold the seeds of the future. With every thought you choose to cultivate, with every word you choose to speak, with every action you choose to undertake, you are planting the garden you will inhabit tomorrow. The power to create a future of greater peace, clarity, and compassion for yourself and for the entire world does not reside in some distant heavenly realm or in changing the unchangeable laws of the cosmos. It resides fully and completely in the quality of your attention and the intention of your heart, right here and right now.